Today's video will be epic. I'm going to be using the BONGCLOUD from 500 to 2000, which means I'm going to be intentionally getting myself into losing positions. And I'm going to be telling you guys about the winning moves that my opponent could play and how exactly I'm going to try to get out of these losing positions. Now, this should help your chess if you've ever gotten yourself into a losing position and you're trying to get out of that position. So, watch the full video, apply what I teach, and your ratings will go through the roof. So, kicking things off in the 500 region, again, I'm going to be putting myself in a losing position, playing the BONGCLOUD, giving you the tips on the moves that black needs to play, and then showing you how I'm going to be coming out of the position. So, pawn to d5 is actually the best move to play if you know someone is going to play king to e2, because the whole tip about when someone's king is in the center of the board is you want to open the center. So the fact that he plays d5, he not only opened the center, but he has a free pawn. But let's play knight c3. So what I'm going to do now, well, if my opponent plays bishop g4, it's kind of GG's, because then I have to play f3 and then I have to take. Well, it's actually not, because if f3 takes, I take with the knight. But what I have to do is I'm going to try to hide my king behind my pieces, and then I'm going to try to develop as quickly as possible. If my opponent makes any mistake, I'm going to try to punish them for that. So after this move, knight to f6, I'm going to play pawn to f3. Why? Because I need to be able to put my king on f2 so that way I'm able to finally develop my bishop. So if black plays something like bishop to f5, that would be like a really good move, because we already know that to take is a mistake. So for example, like this, you do not trade if you know it helps the opponent. So for example, this trade allows my knight to be developed. Now I have two pieces developed, but all black needs to do from here is just to keep the center open, get the pieces out as quickly as possible, get his king out of the center, and then attack my king. The only way I lose this game is if he makes like a crucial mistake. So knight c6 is fine. Let's play pawn to d4. Let's control the center. He needs to now play bishop g4. This guy's finding all the moves because I'm guarding my pawn twice. He's attacking my pawn twice. But now my knight is pinned. So he's basically threatening to just take on d4 because the knight isn't really guarding the pawn. And that's why I'm going to play bishop to e3, adding additional defense to the pawn. Now, if he plays e5, well, e5 may allow me to trade the queens off the board. And that's one other thing that I want you guys to keep in mind is whenever you're defending, let's say you're not down in material. If you're not down in material, but you're defending, it's crucial that you try to get the pieces off the board. So because my goal is to develop, he plays e6, I'm going to play king f2, just moving my king out the way of the bishop so that way I could finish my development. So bishop e7 was played. I mean, my opponent is playing pretty well. He's developing his pieces and everything. I'm going to play bishop e2 just so that way my knight is no longer pinned. And what I'm trying to do after that is neutralize any pieces that is on my half of the board. So I wouldn't say I'm losing anymore because, well, I'm down by a pawn. But apart from the fact that I'm not down by a pawn, I don't think the opponent is going to do anything too drastic that is going to cause my king to be too weak. And another plan that I have in this position is just to artificially castle. And I'm going to be doing this a lot in this series where I play rook to f1 followed by king to g1. And it actually appears as if I castled, even though I started the game playing the BONGCLOUD. Okay, knight d5 is not a bad move. He's threatening my bishop, he's threatening my knight. He's also trying to trade. And because he's ahead in material, the whole idea of trading is correct. So I don't want him to take my bishop. So we're gonna take the knight. We kind of have to trade in that scenario. And this bishop that is on my half of the board, I'm gonna be hitting him with h3. So that way he moves away the bishop. He decides to take the queen. Let's play h3. Let's get that bishop out of my half of the board. He pulls the bishop back to f5. Now, for 500, this guy's playing pretty well. Like, I was expecting him to do something weird, like giving up his bishop for a knight or something like that. But he pulls the bishop back. Okay, the queen is very active on d5. So let's play pawn c4. Let's chase away the queen. The moment I pull my king back to g1, though, it's really just going to be a regular position. So I'm still down by a pawn, which means I'm not trying to trade too much. If I'm able to do something that wins back the pawn, then I can start trading. But even though it's just 1 point, don't just be like, oh, it's just 1 point, it's fine. It's a lot. So here's what I'm gonna do. My d4 pawn is guarded for now. So let me just pull the king back to g1 so that way everything is fine. I may play moves like a3 followed by b4, just to advance my queenside pawns up the board. I also need to get my major pieces in the game because my minor pieces are already doing something. But I'm not gonna lie, for 500, this guy's playing some chess. I was expecting something crazy. You see, he's putting his rooks on open file. The guy's playing some chess. Okay, before I play, well, I have to play a3. Like if I want to play queen d2, I need to play a3 as a prophylactic move so that way the bishop doesn't come to b4 and attack my queen. But he's doing fine. And then he plays e5. Okay, e5, that was not it, bro. Come on, like you're doing so well. You should count, dog. Like I have two pieces on the square. Your knight is the only piece on the square. So technically, I could take on e5 and I'm doing fine. But here's what I'm going to do instead. I'm actually going to do a removing the guard tactic. Pawn to d5. So I'm still going to win the pawn because I'm attacking the knight. And then once he moves the knight, the pawn on e5 is not going to be guarded. I'm just going to take the pawn and attack the queen. Now, he could try knight to d4. If he tries knight d4, I could just take, takes, takes, win a pawn. Or I could just take on e5, hit the queen, and that's also winning the pawn. And his knight on d4 is going to be unprotected. Okay, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. I wasn't expecting that move. The guy's like, okay, you're attacking my knight. I'm gonna counterattack your knight. But what if I take a free knight? He takes a knight, I take a queen. What if I take a knight, he decides to take my queen, and then I just take back the wait. I take back the queen. Oh, but then he's gonna take a knight. Oh, that was a good move then. That was a good move. Take knight. Take knight, take queen, take knight, take pawn. Okay, I have to do it. I have to take the knight if I'm trying to win back my pawn. And then once he takes the queen, I take back the queen, and then he's gonna take my knight. And the thing is, I'm winning back the pawn because once my bishop takes, my bishop guards the pawn. So the position is now equal. But I think he just made a blunder because the bishop on f5 is unprotected. So once I take on c6, I'm attacking his rook. You see how quickly he moved the rook? But he's leaving his bishop unprotected. That's just a free bishop. The thing is, though, if I take the bishop, there's a drawback. My rook on d1 is going to be unprotected. So I'm going to play what is known as an in-between move, trading the rooks first. And then it doesn't matter how he takes back. Then I take on f5, and then I'm ahead by a piece. Guy played very well, though. I think he also played a bit too fast. Like, he should have seen that his bishop is hanging. But, this is just GG's. I'm ahead by a full piece. The pawn here is hanging. Bishop back to d5 also attacks his weak f7 pawn. And I'm not seeing what he's going to play. Pawn g6, I was expecting. I was also expecting him to check. Let me just pull my rook back to f1 so that way he doesn't check my king. Because I really want to play bishop to d5 and apply some pressure to this pawn on f7. Like if he allows that, then it's really losing, which he did allow it. He attacks the bishop, bishop d5. I have two pieces attacking f7. He only has the king guarding. He attacks the bishop again, but that's just a free pawn with check. And he has to be careful where he puts the king. King f8 would have been mate, but he puts the king on g7. That's the correct square. Let's take a free pawn. Like I want to play bishop c5, but I want to take the free pawn first. So that way, once I play bishop c5 and I trade, I'm just going to push my pawns up the board, and then it's just really winning. But this is still winning. I'm ahead by 5 points. So rook went down to d2 and I'm about to trick him. You notice how my pawn looks like it's unprotected, but the king is on a dark square? I'm going to not defend the pawn. I'm going to allow him to take the pawn. Then when I check, it's going to be a fork. Let's see if he's going to fall for this. Hmm. So let's go bishop e3 to attack the rook, Give him that nudge so that way he takes on b2. Let's see if he's going to fall for it. Ha, he fell for it. He took the free pawn. Now the rook and the king is on the same line. Bishop to d4, checks the king, hit the rook. King moves, we grab the rook, and now I could say I'm completely winning. And the opponent resigns. More BONGCLOUD against 600 rated players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 600, and as I promised you guys, I'm going to be playing some BONGCLOUD. And the funny thing is, the Scandinavian is actually the hardest when you're playing the BONGCLOUD. Because if I takes king e2, queen e4 is mate. And now if I play king to e2, he's actually going to take and I'm ahead by a pawn. So this video is not to show you guys how to play the BONGCLOUD. It's to show you guys how to recover from losing positions. Because I'm assuming some of you guys, maybe a small percentage, get losing positions from time to time. So not only am I down by a pawn, but my king is weak. How am I going to get out of this? Let's start by playing knight c3, attacking the pawn. King is very weak, by the way. Maybe pawn to f3, then knight takes, especially if he plays knight c6, threatening knight d4 check. So he plays knight f6 to guard it. So I'm going to play f3. Not a move that I want to play, but I need my king to be safe. He plays bishop f5 to guard the pawn. And now I may, well, if I play king to f2, there's queen d4. I. Okay, what can I do? Maybe I have to take on e4. So let's take on e4. If he checks, then I block. If he plays knight takes or bishop takes, then it allows me to develop my knight to f3. So my goal from here is to finish my development as quickly as possible. So he took with the knight. Let's not take. To take is a mistake. Let's play the move knight to f3, just trying to finish my development as quickly as possible. I have two pieces developed. My king is weak, and the center is also open. Usually, this is what I want you guys to learn. Again, this is not a how to play the BONGCLOUD video. It's how to recover from losing positions. If the center is closed, well, if the opponent's king is in the center of the board, open the center, which means I'm not trying to open the center. I was thinking about playing pawn to d4, but I don't want it to be that easy for him to get an attack. So I'm going to play pawn to d3. And another reason why I'm going to play pawn to d3 is because when it comes to defending, because I also want to teach you guys how to defend as well, one of the main ways in which you guys defend is to neutralize pieces that is on your half of the board. So because the knight is on my half of the board, I'm trying to get that knight away. So well, because he's the one attacking, he needs to like keep the pieces on the board. But if he takes, I'm able to take, and then that's one piece. That's one less piece that is on my half of the board. So I'm good. And then he plays pawn e5. Decent move because he's trying to develop. So here's what I'm going to do. Well, I think he wants to play pawn to e4. I think that's what he wants to do. And then if I takes, queen takes, king takes, bishop takes, that's what he wants to do. Okay, first let's play rook to b1. Rooks needs open file. I need to prioritize the development of my minor pieces, but rook to b1 is just to attack his pawn on b7. If he plays pawn to e4, then this is probably going to be, yeah, he plays pawn b6 because I was like, damn, bro, you're too aggressive. You're 600. Remember what your rating is. Calm down. But pawn to e4 would have actually been way better. Let's play bishop to e3. Let's just continue with our development. And then if he still decides to play pawn to e4, then I'm going to play king to f2, hide my king behind my pieces. It's best to hide your king behind your pawns, so that way you're able to use the pieces to do other stuff. But in this scenario, the position is just kind of open. So I have to hide the king behind the pieces. So queen to d6 was played, assuming he's trying to castle. I want to develop, so let's play king to f2 with the whole idea of playing bishop to e2, just trying to finish my development. He castles his king on the queen side. Let's just go, wait. I want to play knight g5, trying to fork. But let's play bishop to e2 first. I have to develop. And I'm assuming he's going to play bishop to e7 or pawn to h6. So knight g5 is not going to work. I'm not going to lie. I do not want this guy to play e4. Bishop to e7 was played. Fair enough. Now I'm going to artificially castle my king, which is rook to f1 or maybe e1. Doesn't matter. Rook f1 because the bishop is unprotected. My rook is on the same line as the bishop. And then I'm going to play king f1. And basically, it's going to be a normal position. Like, I'm not going to have like any huge advantage because I wasted so much time in the opening. And he's also ahead by a pawn. But, and guys, come on, please. When I ask you guys to send me challenges, please send unrated challenges. I'm at risk of losing 16 points. And then pawn to g5 is such a creative move because I want to take the free pawn, but I'm allowing him to get an open file on my king. The thing is, if I allow him to play pawn to g5, it's also good. So let's say king g1, pawn g5. I'm not gonna take that pawn. It's yeah, I'm not gonna take that pawn. Let's just move the king. It's too risky. Like the rooks are gonna have files on my king. Now I'm in a regular position, but I'm down by a pawn, and black's pieces are way more active. But how am I gonna try to come back from this losing position. For one, I noticed that my rook is on the same line as his bishop, so I'm going to try to go for some tactics. And I don't want you guys to think whenever you trick someone in chess, you should feel bad about it. Never feel bad if you trick someone. Tricking someone is a part of chess, it's a part of life. So don't be, oh, you did not win. I only fell for a trick. I mean, you're the one who fell for the trick. But bishop back to e7 is not bad. Well, e6, because he's attacking my pawn. I'm going to play pawn c4. This is me defending by blocking, but I also have some ideas of playing pawn to c5. And then if he takes, my rook is a bit active, attacking his king. I'm still attacking this pawn on g5, but I honestly do not want to take that pawn. Okay, he decides to pull the bishop back to e7, which is very risky. Okay, we're about to trick him. Watch this. Boom. Pawn. I don't know why he plays bishop d7, by the way. But pawn c4, if he takes, my rook gets the file. And if my bishop gets to a6, that's going to be a checkmate. I have to do it quickly, though. So the moment he takes, I'm just going to push. Yo, this is so risky. Because if he just not fall for this trick, then I'm going to be losing. Like, I'm not going to be losing. I'm going to be losing. And it's a rated game. So I'm going to be losing 16 points. So he took. Let's quickly play d4. Bishop to a6 is a checkmate. If he takes with the pawn, he's losing. He needs to take with the knight. If he takes with the knight, then I don't know what I'm gonna do. Another thing that I want to teach you guys is do not play hope chess. You see, this is me teaching you guys how not to play chess. So if he took with the pawn, which means that's just a checkmate. More BONGCLOUD against 700 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 700, and yes, we're playing more BONGCLOUD. Um, Whenever people do this, I've yet to see someone play d5. So knight f6 is fine. It attacks the pawn. Knight c3 guards the pawn. He needs to play pawn to d5. He needs to play pawn to d5 quickly. Like someone played the BONGCLOUD against Magnus, and that's what Magnus did because he understands that you need to open the center if someone's king is in the center. So, but this guy plays knight to c6, trying to go knight d4 to check the king. So let's go knight f3 to defend the square. But if he plays knight d4 check, I'm probably not going to take. Bishop c5. Now, this may sounds weird, but this guy's playing a bit too principled. And it's going to cost him. Like, I shouldn't have been doing this with my king on e2, but isn't taking on e5 just one of those tactics where if the knight takes back, you're able to play d4? And then if the bishop takes, you takes, and then your position is just safe. I'm just trying to see if it works because I played the BONGCLOUD. Knight takes, check, king back. Let's do it. Let's just go for it. I think he needs to check or castle. He should not take back. But if he checks and I go back, I'm not going to lose. But he took. So let's just play pawn d4. And I'm basically just forking back. If he takes with the bishop, I take with the queen, and then knight c6 hits the queen. But usually it's best to save the bishop. You know, you don't want to give up the bishop. And because if you give up the bishop, you know, the bishop is better than the knight. You know, hopefully you get what I'm trying to say. So he did decide to save the bishop. Let's just take on e5. And now his knight is under attack. It's crazy I'm able to get a position like this with my king on e2. So he moves the knight to g4. Decent move. He's trying to take the free pawn on e5. So I'm thinking of playing pawn to f4 to guard the pawn. I'm also thinking of knight d5 to hit the bishop. But if knight d5, bishop c5 attacks f7. So let's just play... No. If I play f5, bishop c5 is very strong. So let's take the principled route. Let's develop the bishop to guard the pawn. And if the bishop goes to c5 to attack the pawn, then I pull back. So now that he plays f6, now he knows what he's doing because he's trying to open the position. If I takes, queen takes, hit the bishop, bishop back, and I'm safe. But then there's pawn takes. So let's not take. We're already ahead by a pawn. Let's play knight d5 and attack the unprotected bishop. I mean, pawn takes is a very good move still. But once he plays pawn takes, I'm going to pull my bishop back to g3, and then I'm going to neutralize the knight. One thing that I want you guys to keep in mind is you want to ensure that you neutralize pieces that is on your half of the board. So bishop back to c5 was played. There's two pieces attacking e3. And now I'm thinking of knight e3. Bishop g3. Yeah, let's go knight e3. The purpose of knight e3 is to trade. Knight takes e3, bishop takes e3, bishop takes e3, king takes e3, and my king is going to be surprisingly safe on e3. Like, I'm not going to double up my pawns because he's not going to be able to have enough pieces in the attack. So one thing I want you guys to learn from what I'm trying to do from these losing positions, well, you took with the knight, let's take with the bishop, is whenever someone is attacking you, whenever you have a king that is not safe, you want to ensure that you trade the pieces off the board, because the less pieces that are on the board, um I think he's able to take and play queen to g5, which I did not see, but he decides to play pawn to d6. So let's just take. Let's just take. Because if he plays queen takes, I'm going to check him before I trade the queens. Because now I'm going to be ahead by a pawn. And if I'm ahead by a pawn, I just need to trade the pieces off the board. So he decides to take with the pawn. Let's still develop the bishop with check. I probably should have played bishop c4, so that way he also loses the right to castle. Yeah, definitely should have played bishop to c4. But let's just trade. I'm just trying to trade because I'm ahead by a pawn. Let's go queen to d5. No, I'm still preventing his king from castling. I'm expecting him to play rook c8 to attack this weak pawn, or queen to f7 trying to trade. But if he plays queen f7, that could be possibly free pawn. From here, I'm just going to get my pieces in the game. He castles his king. Not bad. Uh, let's get my rook in the game. Just trying to get all my pieces in the game. And I'm also thinking about some rook lift ideas, like rook to d3, rook to c3, check his king, go for some checkmating ideas. Queen to g4 is an interesting move that he could play on my half of the board. Like, this is something that you guys are going to be hearing what I say, and that is try to ensure that you're able to spot all the possible moves on the opponent's half of the board. Now, if you think I should take the queen instead of pulling the queen back to d4, you are 100% correct. But I'm trying to attack this pawn, and because the queen and the king is on the same line, I'm trying to play rook d3 followed by rook c3, which would pin his queen. And taking on c2 looks like a free pawn, but it's not, because the queen and the king will still be on the same line, and rook to c1 is going to be a pin. So there's just so much happening in this position. But if he's careful, then I should be in trouble. I think I should have traded. I probably should have traded. But let's continue with the idea. Let's go rook d3. If he takes on c2, rook c3 wins the queen, surprisingly. What he needs to do is play moves like rook to e1, put his rook on the same line as my king, play d5 and f5. He did play queen c2. And if you're able to see how I'm going to win the queen, then you have some potential. Because when I play the move rook to c3, the queen is not actually trapped, because the queen is able to take a free pawn on b2. The thing is, if the queen takes the free pawn on b2, he's putting his queen on the same diagonal as my queen, which means my rook is in the way, and I'm going to be using what is called a discovered attack, where I'm able to play the move rook to c8 check. It checks the king, it forces him to react to the check, and then I'm just going to take on b2, and that's just a queen. So he took with the rook. Let's just grab the queen. I'm going to play moves like rook b1 threatening mate, rook d1 threatening the pawn, and then this is just over from here. So pawn to b6 was played. Again, do not be pushing pawns on the side that your king is on, because now it allows me to play pawn to a4. And then when you push pawns on the side that your king is on, it creates what is called a hook. And once I push, I'm not going to be threatening to take. Pawn d5, it's a free pawn. I'm not going to be opening my position. I'm going to play pawn to a5, because now I'm threatening to take stakes mate. So he has to be careful. So rook c6 was played, not too bad. If I takes, rook takes, and my queen is under attack. So no, I should have played queen to a2. Queen a3 was not good, because once he plays rook c8, he's threatening rook c3, which is a fork. So I'm going to have to waste some time in order to defend against this. But that's assuming that he sees it. Otherwise, I'm going to take. And if rook takes, I take on e7. And if pawn takes, I check on a8 and I win the rook. But yeah, that's not a hard move to find. So now I have to play something like king e2, taking my king off the same line as his queen. So he decided to play rook c5, and the whole idea was to take on b6. Queen to a7 is mate, so taking back on b6 is bad. I don't know what he's going to play here, but he has to defend a7. Maybe moves this rook somewhere, because he's also not able to put something on c7. Okay, check helps, but let's just move the king. If he checks on c1, that's just free. If he takes, that's still a checkmate. Okay, he plays pawn to a6, but I'm now gonna take on a6, which means I'm threatening a checkmate both on a7 and a8. He could check, probably gonna take and then move the king. Uh yeah, it's still gonna be winning. This should be mating in a few moves. So he checks. Let's just take. He takes back. Let's just move the king. Maybe one more check, and then I attack the rook. And that's what will conclude the game. So now I'm threatening some checkmates and I'm attacking his rook. He needs to keep his rook on this file because I'm threatening to check king over mate. If he keeps the rook on the file, which he didn't, I would have checked and pawn push. But now that he plays this, this is just mating too. I check, king has to go to c8, and that's just a checkmate. More BONGCLOUD against 800 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 800. Let's play some more BONGCLOUD. So knight c6, let's go king e2. Knight d4 check, we should not be afraid of. What I'm afraid of is all the moves that open the position. So pawn to b6 was played, which doesn't really have much to do with the center. So I'm going to play pawn d4 so that way I'm able to control the center. Now I'm controlling all those squares in the opponent's position. So now he has to be careful. And then now that he plays pawn to e5, I want to say I want to play pawn to d5 and hit the knight, but I also like the idea of taking on e5 and then play pawn f4 to hit the knight. But because the goal is to keep the position closed, I'm going to play pawn to d5 and attack the knight. And then if he pulls the knight back to e7, then I just develop my pieces normally. So knight to d4 check is actually very, very risky. Let's just pull the king back to e1. The knight on d4 has no squares. If he's not careful, he's going to lose that knight. So he decides to play bishop to b4 check, which, I mean, it not only traps the knight, but pawn to c3 is now just a fork. Like, I'm not just forking both of his pieces. So if he moves the bishop, okay, let's think. I'm not able to take the knight, but what if I play pawn to b4 or bishop to d2? Like, anyone, okay, pawn to b4, bishop takes, pawn takes is fine. Let's go pawn to b4. The funny thing is, I think he has to take on b4. Because if he doesn't take on b4, I take the bishop, the knight is still going to be trapped, which means I'm going to be winning two moves. Well, two pieces, which is going to be crazy. So he did take. Let's take back. Now his knight is not trapped. His knight is actually a very strong piece on d4, sitting in something that is called an outpost. But I'm not able to use my pawns to neutralize this knight from my half of the board. So I'm going to be using my pieces. He decides to play the move knight to f6, attacking my pawn though. So, I mean, I'm thinking of just playing bishop g5 and trading, but let's just go knight c3 first, see what he's trying to do. Because I would love to play a move like bishop to e3 and just attack the knight. Because then I'm going to have two pieces attacking the knight, and I could also be winning a pawn. For example, now that he plays bishop b7, I play bishop to e3, and I have two pieces attacking the knight on d4. So, and the knight also has no squares to move to. So the plan from here is actually to take, take, take. I also need to keep in mind that my king is not able to get castled. And then the guy decided to sacrifice another piece on e4, which is beyond crazy. So now I'm just going to take the free knight. I guess his idea is to take on d5, but that's not how counting works, bro. You don't give up a knight that is 3 points so that way you're able to gain 2 pawns. That's just 2 points. I'm going to pull the knight back to c3 and attack his bishop. And then once the bishop moves, I still have two pieces attacking the knight on d4. So once he moves the bishop, I take on d4, then take on d4 again. So pawn c6 was played. I mean, I need to be trading pieces off the board anyways. So let's just take the bishop first so that way I'm able to trade. And then once he takes the knight, then I take his knight. And, it's quite hilarious, but this is just completely winning. The pawn takes, the queen takes. I'm going to be ahead by around 4 points. Yeah, I'm going to be ahead by around 4 points. And it's basically, I'm going to be ahead by two pieces. And he did not take the bishop. He decided to play queen to e7. I mean, I think he wants to take with check, but I'm just going to move the bishop though. Let's just move the bishop out the way. Let's just go bishop to c3 actually, so that way I can keep my b4 pawn guarded. And if he plays pawn d4, I pull the bishop back to d2, keeping the pawn guarded. So I'm now not ahead by 4 points. I'm ahead by 6 points. I'm ahead by three pieces. And then the guy played King F8. He wanted to castle, but he slipped and played King to F8. I think things are just not working out in his favor. Let's just develop the knight, apply some pressure to his pawn. If he moves the pawn to attack my knight, he blunders his d4 pawn. And I mean, I'm not going to be able to castle my king because I play the BONGCLOUD, but I should just be able to get as many pieces in the game as I can. So rook to c8 is not bad. He's getting his rook in the game. He's putting his rook on the open file. But I'm also going to play rook to c1. For one, I'm ahead in material. I'm ahead by 6 points. So I need to trade pieces off the board. Two, if he takes and then I takes, my queen is now getting access to his back rank. And then that could open the way for some nasty tactics. Okay, he's not trading. He's down in material. He doesn't trade when he's down in material. That's probably like the only principal thing this guy has done. Let's just develop. I'm developing my pieces. The only piece that is not in the game is my rook on h1. And one thing that you guys need to keep in mind is the importance of castling the king is not just so that way you're able to get your king to safety. It also allows your rook to join the game. Now that he plays pawn to g6, he's trying to play king to g7 and then swing his rook in the game. But then I'm going to play bishop to h6, which checks the king. So now he has to move his king to g8 or e8. And both of these prevents his king from castling. And then once he moves his king, now I play queen to d2. It's developing my queen, but it's also guarding my pawn on b4. How am I going to get my rook in the game? I'm probably going to play g3, king f1, king g2, rook e1. It's going to take some time, but that's what happens when you lost the right to castle. So f5 is interesting. Still, he's not able to play e4. Knight g5 is interesting with bishop f7 check, forcing the king to move here. And then if my queen was on c2, queen to c7 would have been a checkmate. So I'm actually going for that plan. I want to play bishop f7, king f8, put my queen on c2, so that way queen to c7 leads to a checkmate. That would be very nice. So pawn to a5 was played. First, I'm just going to take the pawn like nothing is happening. Then I'm going to play queen c2. If he's not careful, bishop f7 check wins the queen because he's going to be forced to sack his queen. Otherwise, queen c7 is going to be a checkmate. So what move is he going to play here? Okay, he started by playing the move king to f8, which means knight to f7 is just a fork. But because I'm ahead by 6 points, let's play bishop to f7. Let's prevent his king from moving to the e8 square, which means I'm threatening a checkmate. And then he plays rook to c8 thinking, okay, he has to move his queen. But I'm not going to move my queen, bro. Your king is the only defender. I have two attackers. That's just a checkmate. More BONGCLOUD against 900 rated opponents. Stick around. Opponent is now 900. Still going to be getting in some BONGCLOUD, e5. Let's go king to e2. It's hard to play BONGCLOUD when they play e5 because all he needs to do is play d5 and open the center. So I'm going to play knight c3 just to guard my pawn. But he needs to play pawn to d5 and open the center of the board. So if he knows what he's doing, then I could just be in trouble. And I told you guys to send me unrated challenges. And this guy sent me a rated challenge. So now if I lose, I'm going to lose 16 points. But I guess he's just going to be just following principles. Okay, let's go knight f3. Let's hit the pawn. I like to play king to f2, but I'm not. I'm not able to do it. He plays pawn d6. Now I'm going to play pawn to... He needs to play d5 though, pawn to d3. You notice how I'm not playing pawn d4? He develops his bishop to pin my knight. It doesn't really do anything as yet. Now, what I'm going to do is play bishop to e3. If he takes, then I play pawn takes and king f2, but he castles the king. And sometimes you guys play a bit too principled. Like it's good to play principled chess, but if your opponent is breaking principles, you have to also break principles in order to punish them. I need to figure out what to do with my king and my bishop. It's actually not easy. Okay, let's play queen to d2 first. Let's just try to develop the queen. And then I'm going to try to figure out something. Maybe h3, g4, bishop g2. So knight d4, anytime a knight goes to d4, I'm just going to take. In fact, I like the idea of knight a4 here. Because knight a4, knight a4 is not good. If knight a4, he takes. So let's play h3. H3 chases away the bishop. If knight e4, I take the knight. If he takes on f3, so somewhere inside of me wants to take with the king so that way I don't double the pawn and then run the king to h2. But I think the safest route is to play pawn takes. So if I takes, I'm putting my rook on the same line as his king, my king on the same line as his rook. But let's not double up the pawns. Oh my god, this is so risky. This is so risky. Knight check. It's actually funny. I don't need to take anymore because my plan is to run to h2. So once I get my king to h2, my king is actually safe. And then it's just a regular chess game. Knight to h5, king to h2. He literally just helped my king. He took on f3, helps my king to go to f3. Knight d4, helped the king to go to g3. Knight h4, helps the king to go to h2. Now he needs to play f5. He needs to go for some pawn breaks because he's way more developed than, I'm not gonna say way more, but he is more developed than me. My bishop is still on the back rank. I'm gonna play bishop to e2 and attack his knight, knowing that this knight is able to take, but my light squared bishop is just bad. He plays queen to f6, which just immediately allows me to gain a tempo on his queen. Yeah, let's just take the tempo. That's just a free tempo, bro. Now he has to just pull the queen all the way back to d8, which is kind of crazy. And then it's going to allow me to go bishop to d2 and just attack his knight, which is also very. So he pulls the queen all the way back. I like the idea of g4. Like obviously, g4 is a blunder. If pawn g4 is a drawback, and then I'm going to blunder my queen. With that being said, let's stick to principles. Let's develop the bishop, pin the knight. Well, not pin the knight, but attack the knight. And then he counterattacked my knight. So if I take his knight, he takes my knight. And then I take his pawn, and I'm ahead by a pawn. Pawn is a pawn at the end of the day. It's a double pawn, but it's a pawn. Let's go for it. I take his knight, he takes my knight, I take his pawn. It's a pawn. And now I'm trying to play moves like c3 to neutralize his knight. That is going to be on my half. Well, that is on my half of the board. I'm actually thinking about the queen moving to h4. If queen h4, then the queen is going to be on my half of the board. But then he plays pawn to a4. I guess he's trying to play bishop here to attack my queen. That doesn't do anything though. If pawn c3, there's knight f5. I want to trick him. I want to see if he's going to put the bishop on b4 so that way I'm able to fork him. So before I play c3, let's just play another development move. Let's play rook to e1 and get the rook in the game. Know that he plays bishop b4 thinking, oh, I'm attacking your queen. I'm skewering your queen to your rook. No, you're not, bro. Pawn to c3 defends against it, and you're also forked. I'm not going to take the knight, so that way you take my queen. I'm going to take the bishop. And if you move your bishop away, I'm going to take the knight. And now I'm just ahead by a piece. There's one more trick in this position. There's one more trick in this position. My bishop is under attack. If I take his knight or his bishop, he's going to take my bishop. Now, I'm going to pull my bishop back to d1. He thinks I'm trying to save my bishop. I'm not trying to, well, I'm saving my bishop. Let's not lie. But I'm threatening to trap his queen. So if he moves away his bishop for his knight, thinking, okay, let me just move the bishop so that way he takes the knight. I'm not going to take the knight. I'm going to hit him with bishop g5 and trap his queen. With that being said, whenever you see a good move, always look for a better one. Now he has to notice, okay, he took on c3, so I have to just take back, but his knight is under attack. So if he moves his knight away, thinking, okay, I lost my bishop, let's not move the knight. You're about to lose your queen. So knight f5 was played. Look on this. Bishop to g5. Queen is trapped. Queen guards the bishop. If the queen takes, I takes. If the queen goes here, I grab the queen. Queen has, nah, never mind. Never mind. The queen is able to go all the way over there. Never mind. I got a bit too excited there. I forgot that moving the knight allows the queen to swing away. But it wasn't a bad move though. Bishop g5 was not a bad move. You know what would be funny? Wait, his queen is actually trapped. It's not able to go there. My bishop covers the square and it can't go there. The queen is actually trapped. I thought his queen could have moved to a4, but it's trapped. I guess I'm just too strong. It's crazy. So he decides to sack the queen. Let's just take the queen, attack the knight, and I'm trying to say I want to say I'm going for a checkmate, but his king is just so safe. So there's no way to like get any checkmate. So I'm gonna try to create some weaknesses around this king. Like I'm gonna try to find some ways to force him to push the pawns on the side that his king is on. Okay, knight h6 is not bad. Pawn f6 is also coming. Let's just play pawn to f4. The purpose of f4 is just to open the position. Now I'm going to open the position because my king is safe. f6 hits the queen. I was expecting that. Let's play queen h5. So that way, if he plays pawn g6, I take the knight. The knight is not able to go here. Yes, I'm blundering my pawn, but my rook is going to be able to get access to his seventh rank. So he took the free pawn, but let's invade his seventh rank. And then I'm also trying to double up my rooks on the e file, especially if he allows me to double up my rooks on his seventh rank. He's going to be in trouble. So pawn b5 guards the pawn. Let's double up the rooks first. Let's double up the rooks first. And rook d7 followed by rook to e7 is the plan. The plan is to get both of my rooks on his seventh rank. Once both of the rooks reach the seventh rank, then it's really over. He's going to be checkmated. Okay, rook to f7 is a good try because after takes, there's knight takes, but that's fine. I want to trade anyways. After he plays knight takes, this rook also enters the seventh rank. Now he has to maybe protect the rook or maybe defend the knight. But now I'm just trying to attack the pawns around this king or get my bishop into the attack. So he guards the knight. Let's go bishop g4. The plan is to play bishop e6 to pin his knight. Once I pin his knight, especially okay, pawn g6, I thought my queen was about to be trapped, but it has access to the h4 score. I still want to play bishop to h6 though, because it's going to pin the knight. The good thing is he's now just not able to move the knight because my queen and my rook is communicating with his h7 pawn. So pawn b4, let's just take the pawn first, and then once he takes back, then I pin. So he decides to play pawn to h5. Before we even do anything, let's just take on f6, apply even more pressure to that pinned knight, which means the knight is dead. So I'm probably even going to take on g6, hit the king, take the knight next move. Like, yeah, everything is just losing here. So he moves the king. Let's take with the bishop. Let's not trade, seeing that way queen to g6 is going to be a checkmate. And if he takes with the rook, rook takes is going to be a mate. Moving the king doesn't help because that's just a checkmate. More BONGCLOUD against 1,000 rated players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,000 and we're still going to be playing the BONGCLOUD. So after e5, we play king to e2. And I mean, there's no theory here. Like I've watched some of Magnus's games. I've watched some of Hikaru's games, but that's all. Pawn to... So this is breaking principles. And then he plays knight to f6 to attack my pawn. There's a principle in chess that says never play f3, but I'm going to play f3 to defend my pawn. So we already broke two principles, plus the fact that my king is in the center here. So what black needs to do, he needs to open the center of the board. He needs to get his king out the center of the board and then just burst the center of the board open. So now that he plays knight to c6, he's trying to play knight d4 and check my king. But let's play pawn to d3, get a little defensive triangle here. Okay, bishop c5, he's playing some chess. Knight to d4 is now gonna be it's gonna be something if I allow him to play knight d4. So let's play a prophylactic move, pawn c3. Like this is not how to play chess, guys. Like do not move your king so early, obviously, because you need to castle. Do not be making unnecessary pawn moves. Like what my opponent is doing is good, but because I'm breaking so much principles, I think he needs to find ways to break principles as well. And if there's no way to break principles, he needs to open the center to target my king. And I'm gonna play another pawn move, pawn to a4. Again, we're just breaking all the principles in chess. But he needs to be careful here because this pawn to a4 idea is actually a trick. He needs to push his a pawn to a6 or a5 because if he plays like a regular move, well, he did play a6, but I was actually threatening to play pawn to b4 and trap his bishop. So now if I play pawn to b4, his bishop is going back to a7 and he's fine. I need to find ways to get my pieces developed. Like I can't develop this. I can't develop this. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to develop the bishop to e3, which is kind of risky because once the bishop takes and my king takes, my king is now going to be on the third rank. And again, to punish these kings that is in the center of the board like this, you need to open the center. You need pawn breaks. You need d5. Like he needs to play d5 as quickly as possible. I need to develop as quickly as possible. So let's go knight e2. Maybe put the knight on g3, put the bishop on e2, put the knight on a3. Like I just need to get the pieces off the background. So you see, he's being a bit too principled. Like I have a student who does this. Like the opponent is playing weird moves. The opponent is breaking principles, but he doesn't punish the opponent. If someone does something wrong, you need to also do something wrong. So he puts his rook on the same line as my king. Obviously, we don't think about it. If something is on the same line as your king, just get your king off of it without thinking, because then you're going to have to start thinking about too much tactical ideas. But I still need to develop my pieces though. So I need to play, in order to get my bishop out, I'm thinking pawn g3, bishop g2. He plays bishop e6. Again, like this player is, it's, I don't know how to say this, but he's playing a bit too principled. That's all I have to say. I think d5 is coming soon though, because usually after you complete the development of your pieces, you want to start going for the pawn break. So I'm expecting d5. Let's go knight g3, so that way I'm able to develop my bishop. So if he plays pawn to d5, I go bishop e2. He plays h6. That's crazy. Bro, my king is weak. Play d5. Open the center of the board. H6 doesn't even prevent anything from going to g5. Okay, let's finish our development. Let's go bishop to e2. Rook f1, king g1 artificially castles the king. I'm thinking knight d2 or knight a3 to c2. Like a nice maneuver would actually be knight a3 to c2 to e3 to f5. And then my knight is going to be on a very nice square. He needs to play d5 though. Maybe he's going to go queen d7 and connect his rooks because he's just like following all the principles down to the T. But and then he plays. I know exactly what this player's problem is, and I've heard this from so many players. They're always saying, "I'm always fine out of the opening, but I don't know what to do after the opening." Pawn breaks is like the main thing that you need to do, because moving the rook from a6 to c8 literally does nothing. The rook is already pointing towards its own pawn. Why would you point the rook towards its own pawn again? But hey, let's just develop. I'm just developing my pieces here. All my minor pieces are out. And you know what the funny thing is? I'm gonna play pawn to d4. If he doesn't play d5, I'm just not risking it, because if I play d4, he could go immediate d5, and then the center is going to be a bit too chaotic, and my king is not safe. But if I manage to do something like this and maybe rook f1, king g1, I'm going to play pawn to d4. So if you're anyone who has the problem that I just stated, the answer to your issue is pawn breaks. Understanding pawn breaks, what is a pawn break, when to do a pawn break, what's the importance of a pawn break, that's gonna completely help your chess, because he needed to play d5. Like the moment he noticed that I played the BONGCLOUD, he needed to play pawn to d5. So you see, he's maneuvering the pieces. He doesn't know about pawn breaks. He's just maneuvering, and he's playing with the same little structure here. I mean, maybe the queen is coming in. That's not a terrible idea, to be honest. Okay, pawn to d4. No, I like pawn to d4 takes pawn d5. There's pawn e5. So let's go pawn d4. Pawn d4 also threatens the. So he took, which is correct. He needs to trade the pawns and open the center. Let's take. Now he needs to play d5. The thing is, once he plays d5, I'm going to play e5, because I need to ensure that I keep the position closed. But after he plays d5 and then I play e5, he needs to play f6. Because whenever someone's king is in the center, you have to get rid of the pawns in the center. That's crazy. He moves the knight out the way. I saw exactly what he saw. He just doesn't understand what to do with the pawns, man, and that's kind of heartbreaking. Because now once I play pawn to d5, his bishop is actually trapped. Like he saw the fork, but he thought that he needed to move away one of his pieces. But once I play pawn to d5, the bishop just has nowhere to go. So if knight takes, I guess the bishop is still going to be trapped. So now he has to just sacrifice the bishop for a pawn, which is crazy. And then I'm not going to be winning, which is very crazy. So he did sack the bishop. Let's just take. We're now ahead by a bishop. So normal procedure from here. I mean, knight c4, get the rook on e1, pull the king back to g1, and then I basically solved all my problems. And I know, I understand that this is a very weird video, but I think you guys are going to be learning stuff from this video. So he just played knight to f6. My pawn on d5 is under attack twice, and I'm only guarding it once. So I'm going to go bishop c4 to guard it twice. And I probably said this before, but I think the reason why you guys are going to be learning something from the video, even though it's like a very weird video, is because I have a lot of problems that I have to solve. So maybe you guys have been watching me just completely just crushing someone from the opening. But like, how do I operate when there's issues in my own position? So pawn c6 is good because now the queen is able to get to b6 and check my king. This is good though. I think he's playing way better down the piece because I'm gonna take, because otherwise I'm gonna lose the pawn. He needed to play queen to b6, which checks the king and attack the king. That would have won a pawn. So, he still had a lot of good moves. What I'm going to do is play rook to e1. If he checks the king, which I still think would be a good move, it hits the king and the pawn. But if he checks and I go king f1 and then he takes the pawn, nothing is not necessarily going to be under attack. But the fact that I have a weak king and unprotected pieces on the board, like that should already given him clues on what he needs to be playing for. And you see what he's doing? He's trading. You shouldn't be trading, bro. You should not be trading because you're down in material. Now, if I takes, there's queen b6. Okay, I'm gonna assume that he sees that queen b6 is a move, and I'm gonna play king takes e1. Now, the plan is to play king f1, king g1. You see, I'm trying to solve my problems. So he checks. I think he's helping me. I'm going to block with the queen here, assuming that he knows that he should not be trading once he's down in material. He needs to move his queen away. Do not trade, especially since my queen and my king is on the same line. He needs to move the queen so that way he could pin my queen to my king. But if he trades, then his problem is not just the pawn break side of things. Let's see. Uh, Knight b4, he doesn't understand. Knight b4 does not threaten anything, by the way. So let's just trade. If you're ahead in material, just trade the pieces off the board. If your king is weak and you get a defensive position, just start trading pieces off the board. Everything is going to disappear. He's not threatening anything. I'm thinking of playing knight f5, but there's actually rook takes f5, knight takes f5, knight c2 fork. So let's play the move king to d2 first, preventing these little tactical ideas. And then I'm going to be able to get my rook in the game. And then once I get my rook in the game, all my pieces are going to be active. So the knight moves to f5. Well, his knight moves to f6, my knight moves to f5. I'm threatening the pawn on d6. I'm also threatening knight e7 fork. So I'm not sure if he saw the fork or he just guarded the pawn, but he defended. And now I'm going to play rook to e1, getting my rook, which is my least active piece, and then I'm going to be getting that piece in the game. My plan from here is to get my rook to his seventh rank, but that's not the only plan. Pawn to d5, very good move. Let's just pull the bishop back. And yes, I'm allowing his knight to take my bishop because I'm ahead by a piece. If you're ahead by a piece, don't be saying, oh, I don't want to trade my bishops for a knight. You're ahead by a piece, bro. Just get the pieces off the board. So, in addition to getting my rook on his seventh rank, my plan is also to play knight to c2 because my knight is on the edge of the board and I do not want to have my knights on the edge of the board. So knight back to d7 was played. I guess his knight is going to c5. That's more attackers on my bishop. But now I'm going to... No, once I play knight c2, this is now... Oh, that was kind of a blunder, actually. What I wanted to say is I'm using the principle of neutralization to get pieces out of my half of the board. But because my pawn is unprotected, he could take on d5. And then once I play king takes, he plays knight c5, check the king, win the pawn. Very good. Okay, but let's play the move king to d4, though. Because once I play king to d4, if he takes the pawn, now I check him on e7, which he did. So he took the pawn. I check him on e7, which is now a fork. Because now his king has to move, and then I'm going to grab the pawn. And I need to just be a bit careful because my knight is going to be pinned, and we know what we do to pin pieces. We apply pressure to the pinned pieces. But if he plays knight b6, which is applying pressure to my pinned knight, luckily I'm able to play knight e3, which defends the knight, and he just does not have any ways to add additional pressure to my knight. Now, obviously, he should not trade the knights, so he plays pawn to f5, which makes some sense. He's trying to do a removing the guard tactic. He's trying to play f4, forcing my knight away. But what if I play the move king to e5? Oh God, that was such a bad move. I just blundered badly. I just blundered horribly. Oh my lord, he missed it. He needed to play knight takes d5, and then if I play knight takes d5, rook to e8, and then my rook is gone. But he decided to play rook to e8 check instead. I'm not gonna take the pawn, because if I take the pawn, my knight is gonna be pinned. And then if he takes, I lose the rook. Dang. Okay, fine. I made a blunder. Let's go back to d4. Let's fix it. Now, if he takes, I'm not going to play knight takes because I'm going to lose the rook. But if he takes, I'm going to play king takes, and I'm still ahead by 2 points. And now, if he plays pawn to f4, attacking my knight, I'm going to put the knight on c2 and keep the rook guarded. Whoa, that's crazy. And obviously, he should not trade, so he checks. And then once I move my king, not here, by the way, because if I go here, that's a skewer. So I have to go here. Okay, I'm not in good shape here, but I have to do it. He needs to play rook to d2. But he didn't. Bro, you need to put the rooks on the second rank. Now I go king to d2, everything is safe. If you check, don't be checking someone's king in the endgame. You should only check someone's king if it helps you. Like you checking someone's king doesn't help you in any way. No, once I play knight d4, he has no more checks. Not really threatening this far, seeing that way my knight is pinned, but he has nothing anymore. Now I'm just going to be attacking his weak pawns and try to find ways to push my past pawns. So he plays pawn to g5. Now let's play rook to e6 because we're in the end game. We're now attacking the weak pawns. He guards the pawn. Let's play rook to e7 check. That's a fork. Checking the king, forcing the king to move, grab the pawn on b7. Oh God. Oh, I almost thought I blundered, but I have to find good defensive moves. Like my knight is pinned, he's applying pressure to my pinned knight. There's only one way to get out of this, and there's rook to e7 check. Because now I check the king and I'm pulling the king away from the knight. And then the funny thing is, okay, what was I gonna say? Yeah, I'm able to play rook to e6, attacking both the pawns at the same time. But if he plays rook to e5, before I take one of the pawns, I still have to check the king again. He's not able to take as my knight guards, even though the knight is pinned, he's still not able to take. Then I'm going to take the pawn for free. And then if he puts his king back to c5, I want to take this pawn. But if I take the pawn, he takes my knight. So I check the king again. This is like a windmill. And then once the king moves, then I take the pawn. And I'm assuming he's going to move his king. And then I check the king again. And then once he moves his king, I'm now just safe. So no, I'm just going to start push my pass pawn up the board. And then I'm just winning. So he puts the king here. He wants to take, but now I'm going to check the king here, forcing the king away. And now I'm just going to activate my king, push my pawn up the board. And now we're just actually winning. He moves the king, but that's a fart, bro. That's just a fart. Grab the rook, and now we just push the pawns up the board, push the pawns up the board, and this is now just going to be a ladder checkmate. Give a check, king has to move, the queen is the guard, the rook is the attacker, and that's just a checkmate. More BONGCLOUD against 1100 rated players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1100. Let's keep up the disrespect. Let's go king to e2 on the next move. It's kind of crazy because I am seeing a lot of French defense. So pawn to d5, again, this is not me doing theoretical stuff. It's just to keep the position close. Pawn c5, we go pawn f4. The more pawns that you have in front of your king, the safer your king is. Knight c6, let's go knight f3. And now my goal is just to start developing my pieces. Knight f5, let's move the king out the way so that way I'm able to develop my bishop. It would also be beneficial if I'm able to play pawn c3 followed by pawn d4. Okay, knight g6 is very strong because it immediately attacks my f4 pawn. So I'm kind of forced to play pawn g3, which is not a pawn move I wanted to play. But in my defense, is knight on g3 is not as active as it looks. So after pawn bishop to e7, I'm going to play pawn c3 with the intention of playing pawn to d4. So that way I'm able to play bishop to d3, and all the pawns around my king will keep my king safe. The only downside of this is I'm putting my pawns on dark scores, which means my c1 bishop is horrible. Let's go bishop to d3 though. Let's continue with my development. And because the rook is on the same line as my king, I'm definitely going to just move my king out the way with king to g2. So bishop moves to b7 now. Now here's what's happening. If I move my king to g2, I'm putting my king on the same diagonal as his bishop, but he has a pawn on d5. It's going to be tricky for him to move it. I just need to be aware of it as well. I have an idea. Let's go pawn to h4. I actually have an idea. You see, come on, guys, like, Please ensure that you work on your chess understandings. These are the things that helps your chess understandings. If someone's king is weak, closing the position does not help. Look on this light squared bishop. You see what he just did to his light squared bishop? He just killed his light squared bishop. And this is actually a regular position for me now. He moves his rook out the way. Pawn h4, the knight goes to f8. There's no mate with a knight on f8. So let's play knight g5 with some queen h5 ideas. You guys are probably saying, bro, are you really going to play the game without developing your knight on b1 and your bishop on e3? Probably. Let's see. It's funny. Pawn to h6 is actually a blunder, which he did. There's actually a very nice tactics in this position. Remember, how do we find the best move? Look for checks, look for captures, look for threats, look for ways to put pieces on the opponent's half of the board. With that being said, bishop takes g3 is alright, but he's going to take my knight instead. Knight takes e6 is nice because it hits the queen. The pawn on f7 is overworked, and if he takes, then knight takes, hit the rook, and then the rook has to move. But the move that I'm in love with is actually knight takes f7. And the reason why I like knight takes f7 is because once the king takes on f7, I'm able to play queen to h5, which pins the knight and it wins the knight. Because I'm going to be attacking the knight twice. He's not going to be able to add additional defense to the knight, and this king is going to be vulnerable. But it's gonna be hard to win the game if I don't get my knight in the game. So maybe I need to go knight d2 to f3 and then find somewhere for the knight. So let's go queen to h5. I'm just gonna take the knight on the next move, like regardless of what he plays. Maybe he's gonna move his king. I'm just gonna take the knight, hit the rook, and from there, the plan is probably f5, so that way I'm able to sacrifice the bishop. So he moves. Wait, take with the queen, check, king over, check. Take with the queen, check, king over. Wait, man, take with the queen. Okay, I'm not 100% sure, but this battery has to be dangerous. If check king over, check king up, I have nothing. But if I play h5, check king over, check king up, bishop to g6 is going to be a checkmate, which is going to be crazy because I haven't developed my knight and my bishop. So it's not going to be the most principled game. But I mean, what can I say? I did not promise you guys that I'm going to be playing principled chess because the BONGCLOUD is not principled chess. What I promised you guys is how am I going to be getting out of the losing positions? That's what I promised you guys. Queen to c7. Look on this. Queen c7 didn't even guard the pawn. But I'm not going to take the pawn because I'm trying to mate him. This move, pawn to h5, is just because I'm able to see further in the future. And I know if check king up, check. Wait, check. Wait, check king over, check king up. Yeah, if check king over, check king up, bishop g6 would be mate if it was guarded. That's why I'm going to play pawn to h5. I think he's able to play bishop back to f8 though. Like bishop back to f8 would be, I'm not going to say he accidentally defended against the mate, because even bishop to d8 works because now the rook guards, which means if check king over, check king up, well, that's mate. I think it's still mate. Check, king has to move, check, king here, that's mate. Check, king over, check, king up, bishop g6, king has to move, that's mate. Hopefully you guys were able to pause the video and see this, but this is actually just a checkmate. Queen to h7, check. King has to go to f8 or f7. Once the king goes to f8, we play queen to h8 check. If the king goes to e7, that's a checkmate. If the king goes to f7, we check on g6 first. And that was the whole point of h5. And then it forces the king to e7, then queen g7 is mate. So king to f7, we play bishop g6 check. The king has to go there, and that's just a checkmate. More BONGCLOUD against 1200 rated players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1200. Let's hit him with a BONGCLOUD. E6, we go king to e2. And it's funny, I'm facing a lot of French defense in the BONGCLOUD. Like, you guys should know what I'm going to do here. Like, if they do the French, the goal is to keep the position close. So pawn c5, I go pawn f4, just try to put a lot of pawns in front of my king. He develops his knight, I develop my knight. And in order for me to move my bishop out the way, I'm going to play king to f2. So knight to f, that's actually the score for the knight. Like, this guy's actually playing some chess. Okay, what do I do here? Pawn g4, not playing that. Maybe just, yeah, let's just go knight c3. Let's just keep developing. I'm not afraid of pawn to d4 due to knight e4. And now that he plays pawn c4, if I play pawn d4, there's queen to b6, but then there's knight e2. Yeah, let's go pawn d4. The thing is, the more pawns that is in the center of the board, the more the position is closed, the safer my king is going to be. So now that he takes, I was thinking about taking with the pawn, but I have to prioritize my development. So let's take with the bishop. It's funny because I already have 3 pieces developed. Queen b6 checks the king. Um, yeah, this is losing, but let's see how much he knows about chess. Let's play king to f1. If he plays knight e3, then I just have to take. And, maybe queen c1. But again, let's see how much he knows about chess. This is a very good position. The knight did went to e3. I cannot move my king. I have to take on e3. And then once he plays queen takes e3, my pawn is under attack. Okay, so now I need to defend the pawn. So knight to e2. Nah, that's weird. I think I need to play queen to d2. I think I need to trade. That's another thing that you guys need to keep in mind is whenever you're in a losing position, not necessarily losing, because if you're losing, it could mean you're down in material. So whenever you're under attack or your king is not safe and you know that there's going to be a lot of pieces attacking your king, just trade the pieces off the board. Because look on this. I just played the BONGCLOUD, but I'm not dead lost. It's just a weak king. And then he plays knight to d4, which is kind of a weird move because it's not like he's threatening to take on c2. A piece is on my half of the board, though. So whenever there's a piece on our half of the board, we still have to neutralize those pieces. So now I'm going to play the move knight to b3, which I like knight to b3, by the way, because if he takes the knight, I'm able to take with the a pawn. Now my rook joins the game. So all my pieces are just joining the game. Bishop to b4. I'm thinking of knight to b4, which I'm gonna play. I mean, bishop b5 check is also strong. But once I play knight, wait, think, bro, think. Yes, once I play knight to b5, not only am I threatening to fork, I'm also attacking his pawn on a7 twice. So if he's just like, okay, let me just get my king out the center of the board, think. Pawn c3, bishop c5, pawn b4 doesn't do much. There's also knight c2. Knight c7, rook b8, then I take the pawn. Or I could just take the pawn. Knight c2 hits the rook. Rook b8, then I take the pawn. That's called removing the guard tactic, by the way. Let's go with that. So let's attack the rook, forcing the rook to move away from guarding the pawn. And then we take the pawn. And then we're going to be ahead by pawn. It's very risky though, because usually when you put your knight in someone's half of the board, it could get trapped. My rook is under attack. Let's just pull the rook back. No funny business. Let's just pull the rook back. And then my knight on, okay, he just attacks the knight. Like he didn't try to trap the knight. So let me just pull the knight back, which means I'm just officially ahead by a pawn here in an endgame. Bishop to d7 applies some pressure to the knight, but the bishop guards the knight. So I'm actually going to play king to e2, so that way I'm able to connect my rooks, and that way my 8th rook is able to join the game. And it's funny because he's now trying to trade the rooks off the board. But you shouldn't be trading once you're down in material, bro. I'm going to play pawn c3, just so that way my bishop is not like guarding both my pawn and my knight at the same time. It's also going to allow me to pull my knight back to d6, d4 if I have to. Or maybe just put my knight on d6 to attack b7. It's not going to be an easy game to win, but I am ahead by a pawn, so I will be trading pieces off the board. Now, even though I want to trade pieces off the board, taking the rook here would be bad, because I'm just helping his rook to get an open file. So let's play knight to d6. Let's attack the weak pawn. Let's force him to defend the weak pawn because we're in the end game. And in the end game, we should attack pawns. And you see the type of okay, I'm not gonna say I completely regret making this video because I think you guys are able to see like how these guys are not finding the winning move and the type of mistakes they're making. Because to take is still a mistake. So him taking on a2 just puts my rook on an open file. And now he plays bishop c6. I'm now going to hit him with pawn to b4. Why? Because the bishop is the only defender of his b7 pawn. So, well, I was trying to play pawn to b4 and attack the bishop, but pawn to d4 is actually a very nice move because now the bishop is on a very long diagonal. And I'm thinking of playing knight e4, but it puts the position in opposite colored bishops. So let's play bishop e4. If he decides to trade, then I'm going to have like a super knight. Like once I take, my knight is just going to be very strong because it's targeting both f6 and d6 at the same time. And I'm also threatening to win a piece. So for example, pawn takes, is he losing? Knight f6, king move, knight d7, 4. Hit the rook, hit the knight, hit the bishop. And if he takes, I hit the pawn first. And then once he moves the rook, I take the bishop. Yeah. Check for rook here takes, check, move takes. And I'm just ahead by a piece. This is me understanding patterns, by the way. This is me saying, okay, if a knight was on d7, that would be a fork. So knight f6 check, it comes with tempo. It's kind of risky though. I need to ensure that this is not like a blunder or anything. But once he moves the king, knight d7 is just going to be a fork. So he moves the king. Let's fork him. He took first, and I was expecting that move, but now I play rook to b8, and both of his pieces are still forked. So that was the idea. So once he moves the rook, I'm going to take, and he needs to play something like rook to c2, and then I'm going to go king to f3, not losing the pawn, and I'm just going to be ahead by a knight in the endgame. And then from here, it's just win this pawn, roll the passed pawn. So let's take here. Rook to c1 doesn't work, by the way, because I'm just going to take. And I don't want to pull my king back. Even though king to f1 guards the pawn, the king needs to be active, which is why I'm going to play king to f3. It also keeps my pawn guarded. So if he checks, I play king here. Probably. Okay, he plays f6. F6 doesn't help. Okay, f6, I takes, king takes, check. Or maybe just play knight d7. Wait, no. I takes, and then after king takes, I play knight to a4, preventing the rook from checking my king, and I'm adding additional attackers to his b2 pawn. So even if he plays the move pawn to b4 and attack my knight, I should be able to play rook takes b2 and just take the free pawn. Because if he takes my knight, I take the rook. If he takes my rook, my knight is safe. Pawn to h4 doesn't do much. Let's take with the rook, so that way we're able to trade the pieces off the board. And then from here, I'm just winning. Rook to c5. Okay, knight to c5. Attack the pawn. If he attacks my knight, that's actually a fork. So maybe he needs to push the pawn 2 squares. And then I'm going to have to figure out what's the plan from there. But if he moves the pawn 2 squares, okay, he didn't do none of that. He plays king f5, which is something. King f5 is something. Because I could take the pawn so that way I have a passed pawn. If he checks, I move. He checks, I move. And then I'm just safe. And then I'm just going to push the pass pawn up the board and win. So that's actually kind of crazy because I was thinking about playing pawn to g3 to guard the pawn. But let's take. If he checks, I just move. Just move. If he checks again, just move. This is all I need to win. Pass pawn. What do we do with a pass pawn? We push them up the board. Pass pawns must be pushed. He checks, just move. There's no more checks on the king. Still going to push the pass pawn up the board. And he needs to be careful. Pushing a pawn immediately loses the game because the king and the rook is in like a forking pattern. So I'm threatening knight d6, which just immediately wins the game. So he didn't fall for that, but pass pawns must be pushed. If he checks, I'm just going to move, and then I'm just going to move the knight somewhere and just continue to roll the pawn up the board. So he checks, let's just move. I'm going to move the knight and then just roll the pawn up the board. Okay, doesn't do much. Let's move the knight out the way and then just roll the pawn. Pass pawns must be pushed. And once he tries to get the rook on b8, all I need to do here is just attack the rook. He's going to be forced to sack the rook. And then I just take, and then it's now it's just completely winning. So he moves the pawn. Let's just go here to win the pawn. King to f4 was played. That is a free pawn. And then I'm just going to take the pawn push. Let's get the king over in the game. I'm not going to be stalemating this. Push, let's just take. I only need the rook to win. So the king is able to only go here, which means if I put the knight there, that's a stalemate. Actually, let's go here. Let's not risk anything. If he moves, no, I check. And then once he moves, I go, let's just move the king. Still not a stalemate. But once he moves the king, then I take the pawn. Yeah, let's take. Still not a stalemate. And then I just need to set up a checkmate from here, which should not be hard. I'm just trying to ensure that the king has somewhere to go. So if I go here, okay, my knight covers these squares. The king will always be able to get to these squares. So from here, it's just mate. king move, I go here. Once the king move, I just need to waste a move to force his king back. And then I just cut off the king. And then once the king move, I continue to make progress. He comes up, just waste a move. Once he goes back, I just cut off the king. And then once he moves, same thing. King up. Once he goes back, waste a move. And then once the king moves, that's just a checkmate. More BONGCLOUD against 1,300 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,300 and we're still playing the BONGCLOUD. That's a French defense that he's playing, by the way. But okay, he plays d5 and against any French or Caracan, I'm going to play pawn to e5. And this is not me doing it because of me knowing BONGCLOUD theory. Like, I know nothing about the BONGCLOUD. The BONGCLOUD is bad. This is just me understanding about chess. And what I understand about chess is we need to have a lot of pawns in front of the king if the king is not safe. So knight c6, let's go knight f3, maybe king f2, just park the king on f2. And then after that, it's just going to be like very normal development. Bishop d7, king f2. My opponent needs to play f6 and then pawn takes f6 as quickly as possible. Like that's what he needs to do in order to punish me for doing that with my king. Queen to b6 is also a move that could punish me. But if he plays pawn c4, I'm going to put my king on h3 and then put the king on h2. And I assume that the king is going to be very safe. So let's play pawn c3. The plan is to play pawn d4 eventually to just really close the position. For example, if he plays knight e7 or knight h6, then I can't go pawn d4 because he's gonna basically use his knight to attack d4. So he decides to play pawn to d4 himself, which is not terrible, but it kind of weakens the c4 square, as you could see. So now I'm gonna play knight a3, and this is yes, I'm breaking principles, but that's the thing. You have to understand when to break principles, how to break principles. For example, what I say a lot when it comes to putting the knight on the edge of the board, I say do not put the knight on the edge of the board. Now, whenever you see me put the knight on the edge of the board, what I'm gonna say is don't put the knight on the edge of the board and leave it on the edge of the board. So you put the knight on the edge of the board and then you take it off the edge of the board. For example, the guy just put his knight on the edge of the board. Where's the knight headed? F5. It's funny. Knight g4 is actually not good because I'm going to be able to play king g3 and attack the knight. So he needs to just play knight f5. So I'm going to play knight c4 to hit the queen. But I think I need to play one more, well, one prophylactic move. And hopefully you guys know what prophylaxis is. Like I try my best to use as many chess terms as I possibly can. So, for example, once he moves the queen, I'm assuming he's just going to want to play pawn to b5. So, I'm going to use the time to play pawn to a4 to prevent him from playing pawn to b5. And then my next move is probably to develop my bishop to d3 and get my rook in the game and then run my king to g1. Like, I'm not going to play king g1 and just block in my rook. He plays bishop e7, decent move. Not afraid of bishop h4. I guess he's just trying to castle his king. But let's finish our development. Let's go bishop to d3. And there's going to be, if he plays pawn to g5, he knows chess. Nah, actually, never mind, because I have two defenders, two attackers. But pawn g5 is an idea. Pawn to f6 is also an indication that he knows chess. But I'm not gonna lie, guys. I kind of feel I don't like to do unproductive stuff, you know? I feel very unproductive making a video like this. But I'm trying to make it as productive as possible because you are the guys who voted for this opening. So I'm trying to teach you guys like how to solve certain problems. For example, this bishop on c1. How on earth am I going to get this bishop in the game? Just watch me. Just watch me. First, to solve these types of issues is sometimes you just have to focus on your other pieces that are not doing anything. So for example, it's very easy to solve the problem of my rook. So I'm just going to swing the rook in the game, you know, no brainer. And then it's very easy to solve the problem of my king. I'm just going to play king to g1. But then once it's time to solve my bishop, not sure how I'm going to do it yet, but to take is a mistake. So if he takes on c3, I'm going to take on d3. And that's just going to easily help my bishop to be more developed. With that being said, I also want to teach you guys about the tension. Like keeping the tension in chess is like super important. Like you should never take something unless you're taking something for free or you taking this thing is going to improve your position. So now he plays the move pawn to a6 and I'm about to play yet another prophylactic move. In order for you to understand prophylaxis, you have to be able to have the skill of reading the opponent's mind. And you're actually not reading the opponent's mind. You're just looking on the chessboard and you're seeing what is happening. Like, why would someone play pawn to a6? He would play pawn a6 with the intention of playing pawn to b5. How do we deal with this? We just need to play pawn to a5. This is called prophylaxis because now he's not able to play b5 because I'm going to en passant. And his b6 square is weak, which means eventually I should be able to get a knight on b6, which would hit the rook and the bishop at the same time. But I'm not really trying to play knight b6 here. I'm trying to solve the problem of my knight, especially the fact that his rook is on the same line as my king. The guy needs to play f6. He needs to just play f6. There's certain things that you need to do without thinking about it. And pawn to f6 is one of them. Okay. Okay, what do I do here? Okay, now that he plays pawn f6, I'm thinking about playing queen c2 to attack h7. So queen c2, if he takes, I takes. He's not able to takes. Queen c2, if g6, I sack. Takes, I check. King over, grab the knight, and I'm winning. Queen c2, always look on the opponent's check. If he checks, I move. Queen c2, takes, takes. If he takes, I takes. If he check, I move. So let's go with queen c2. Still not solving the problem of my dark squared bishop, but two things is going to happen. One, my opponent is going to take on c3 and just help me to solve that issue, but he's not doing it. So it seems as if he knows what he's doing. Two, I'm going to have to play something like pawn b3, bishop a3, just find a diagonal for the bishop. But queen to c2 is actually a very interesting move. I think he needs to play pawn to f5 to not lose h7. If he plays knight f5, I may takes, and then pawn e6 hit the bishop. So, and it's kind of uncomfortable, annoying, or kind of not counterintuitive to play a move like f6 and then play a move like f5. So he decides to take on e5, which is it's something because now I'm going to take on h7 with check. This is called an in-between move. Again, I'm going to try my best to teach you guys everything that I know because I shouldn't have posted a BONGCLOUD video. So I want you guys to still learn something from it. So I'm going to take on h7 check. Then once he moves the king, I take on e5. If knight takes, I takes, I'm fine. If he plays knight check, I move. If he plays bishop check, I'm not able to takes, but I'm able to play pawn g3. And if rook takes, I takes. Okay, so let's take first with check. It's kind of greedy because my king is not safe, but now we take on e5. And if he checks here, the knight is not able to take, but there's pawn g3. If he checks here, I go back. I want you guys to notice another thing. If you guys are able to spot my blunders, it's usually when I don't look on the opponent's forcing moves or I'm just not aware of a piece that is able to enter my half of the board. So, for example, I need to be able to see knight b4, knight g4, bishop h4, rook f4, rook f3. And I already said it. Like, think about it. If I'm always saying, in order to find the best moves, look for moves that you can play on the opponent's half of the board, you don't think the opponent is also thinking the same? So queen c7 makes some sense. He's applying pressure to e5. Luckily, e5 is heavily guarded. So let's get the king off the same line as the rook first. No drama, no funny business. Rook is on the... Okay, rook takes f3 is kind of interesting. Swing over the rook and attack. One more thing that I want to teach you guys is because my bishop is not in the game, my rook is not connected, sometimes you can think about like exchange sacrifices. And then you could be like, okay, black is temporarily ahead by a bishop. Well, you shouldn't have blundered the pawn, to be honest. But I'm thinking of playing pawn to d3 to get my bishop in the game. But if I play pawn d3, that's the drawback principle. I need to teach you guys stuff because I shouldn't have posted the BONGCLOUD video. So pawn to d3 would be bad because if I play pawn d3, my queen no longer guards the bishop. I want to play pawn to d3. With that being said, first I need to fix the issue of my bishop. Bishop g6, bishop e4. I don't think it matters too much. Bishop g4, though, there's knight here. Like bishop e4, there's knight here. And then this is going to be under attack. So let's actually just rest the bishop on g6. Then we play pawn to d3. And then I'm, hey, bishops are better than knights, but not this bishop. If he allows me to take this knight, especially since it's going to weaken this king, I'm going to do that fast. But let's see what he plays here. Okay, knight to f5, not bad. Doesn't really do much. Like my bishop is unprotected, but I'm not necessarily gonna take because he's just gonna play rook takes. Like if I get in any problems with my bishop, then I'll take. But there's also nothing that is able to attack my bishop. With that being said, let's finally play pawn to d3. Let's finally complete our development on move 20. I mean, that's what happens when when you play weird openings. And now I could play something like bishop to g5 and just exchange that bishop. Or I could just play bishop f4. It's funny, like this is now just a regular position. And I'm also thinking of, okay, he pulls the bishop back, so I'm definitely gonna trade. No doubt about that. I was about to say I'm thinking of queen f2, queen h4 ideas if I'm able to get rid of this knight, but I have to just get rid of that bishop off the board. This knight on f5 is actually very strong. It's the closest piece that is in my half of the board. So I'm assuming he's gonna take with the d rook because this rook is already on a file. I'm not going to take on d4 because I know that to take is a mistake. Bishop to g4, I'm in love with because if takes knight takes, I'm not threatening that. So I actually don't like that move anymore. Maybe just bishop f4. Like bishop f, I mean, it puts the bishop on the same line as the queen. So in some universe, knight d6 could be a possibility. And then with that being said, I need to find out what to do with my rooks, what to do with my queen. It's not going to be very easy to win this game. Maybe queen to e2 to e4. Rook to d7 is a very mature move. It shows a level of maturity playing a move like rook to d7. I know what the opponent's idea is, but there's actually a trick here. For example, if he plays rook to d8, trying to double up on my backward d pawn, he basically wants to take on c3, then take. But if he plays rook to d8, knight b6 actually traps the rook. So that is something. With that being said, though, like how do I continue from here? Because if I play rook to d1 now, I'm gonna lose this pawn. That's the drawback principle. Maybe just move my queen to e2. It's closer towards the center of the board. I mean, queen e2, pawn takes, rook d1, and then my d pawn is going to be under attack, and I'm going to be forced to play rook e1. But it's fine. Like I'm not going to act. Okay, I was about to say I'm not going to act as if I'm better, but I forgot that I won a pawn on h7, which means my plan is to actually trade the pieces off the board. So I'm probably going to play pawn to g4 as well. And another thing I want to teach you guys is you should not be pushing pawns on the side that your king is on. So if you're going to be thinking about playing a move like pawn to g4, you have to ensure that it is very safe. Um, if he really wants to attack d3, he needs to take and then play rook to e8. If he plays rook to d8 immediately, knight b6, and then he trapped his own rook. It's crazy. Like I'm just tricking these guys. So let's go knight b3, and then now if he takes, I'm going to take the rook first and then take on c3. If he takes on a5, I'm just going to take the rook. So sorry, bro. I'm so sorry. So he took. Obviously, we're going to just get rid of the rook. And then after queen takes, we take. Wait. How about knight g5 though? I mean, knight g5 is something, right? Because if he's not careful, queen to h5 is mate. Nah, not really. Yeah, let's just take. Maybe he's gonna play queen takes d3, but at the end of the day, I'm the one who is ahead by a piece. I'm the one who wants to trade the pieces off the board. So if I play rook d1, there's queen takes c3. I don't want to trade. I don't want to give him any material, but I want to trade. So let's take the queen. Once he plays rook takes, my pawn on c3 is under attack. If I play rook c1, that's a drawback. I lose this pawn. And if I put this rook on c1, that's just weird. So let's go bishop to d2. Yeah. Let's go bishop d2 to guard the pawn. And then I'm going to try to neutralize this rook that is on my half of the board. I also need to get my king in the game, but I'm ahead by an exchange, so I'm fine here. He also only has a minute on his clock. Pawn c4. It's not the worst move, not the best. He's trying to play bishop c5 check, but I'm just gonna play king f1. I mean, I'm trying to get my king in the game anyways. So let's just play rook to a4 here, attacking weak pawns. I mean, he was the one who put the pawn on c4, so I'm gonna attack it. There's no pawn b5 due to en passant, and if he checks and I move, he's not gonna be able to guard. So he decides to play knight h4, which makes a lot of sense because once I take the knight, my bishop is going to be left unprotected. But it's basically going to be us trading. Like I take the knight, he takes my bishop, I go back and I attack the rook. Or I play knight g6, check. It's a fork. I'm not winning any pieces because the bishop is guarded, but I'm the one who is ahead in material. And then once the knight takes, I'm also able to take on c4. So I guess what I'm teaching you guys is how to come back from losing positions. You know, rooks on the seventh is in heaven. Hit the pawn, hit the knight. Knight d5, that's a fork, but let's take the pawn. Assuming he's gonna take. Um, I need to find a way to get my rook attacking this pawn. I also need to not get any back rank ideas. Let's play rook a7. We still need to ensure that we're attacking weak pawns. He attacks my pawn. I take his pawn, guard my pawn. We're in the end game. We're attacking weak pawns. He attacks the rook. Let's take this pawn. And then if he takes this pawn, this is now a pass pawn. So let's move the rook out of the way so that way we're able to roll the pawn up the board. Knight c2 hits the rook. Rook e2 hits the knight. He's able to check, but I'm able to move the king. He still has to save the knight. Pass pawns must be pushed. He moves the rook, but pass pawns must be pushed. Now he has to sack the rook. And then I'm going to play rook d7, get both of my rooks on the seventh rank. And then it's just going to be GG's. So I'm assuming he's going to just resign from here, which he did. So more BONGCLOUD against 1,400 players. Stick around. My opponent is now 1,400, still playing some BONGCLOUD. And the whole idea is just to put myself in some problems and just to see when persons are going to know how to punish these types of situations. For example, after a move like d5, I wouldn't take on d5. Because if I take on d5, that's me opening the center of the board. And what I need to do is play e5 so that way I close the center. Now he develops his bishop, but let's just play pawn to f4. Like my whole idea is to just create a pawn blockade in the center. You notice what I'm doing? And then, okay, I'm thinking of pawn c3, but I'm not going to play pawn c3 unless he plays pawn c5. So the first thing that I'm going to do to solve the problem of my bishop being developed is to move my king out the way. Once I move my king out the way, my bishop is going to be able to be developed. I'm going to be able to play moves like knight f3. And this is actually not too bad. But what black needs to do here is black needs to play moves like pawn c5, pawn f6, pawn breaks. The main takeaway from this is you need to use pawn breaks to open the center if someone's king is in the center. Now, he puts his queen on the same line as my king, which makes a lot of sense. I need to develop those, so let's just go knight f3, adding some defense to the pawn. He needs to play c5, that's correct, but I'm going to play pawn c3 just to try to keep everything closed as possible. And then if he takes, I'm just going to take back, and then I'm going to be able to play knight to c3 to develop my knight, and then it's just a matter of development from here. So the only issue that I have now is the fact that my king is not the safest. So he took, let's take back. He's also helping me to develop my knight. Bishop to g4 is not a terrible move. I was just about to say he's moving the same piece more than once, but he's actually threatening to take my knight, and if I play queen takes the pawn. I'm still going to develop. Like, if he takes my knight, I'm going to play king takes. I'm not going to give him the free pawn. So, yes, he is moving the same piece more than once in the opening. But, okay, you don't need to play pawn a6, bro. That's an unnecessary pawn move. Like knight h6, knight f5, get your pieces in the game. Okay, pawn a6 didn't really do much. I'm not able to develop my bishop because I'm going to lose this pawn. Hopefully, you guys are aware of the drawback principle. Unless I'm able to trap his queen, like bishop d2, he takes rook b1, queen a3, rook b3. But then he's able to move the queen. So that doesn't work. With that being said, that doesn't work. If I play bishop to d3, the queen no longer guards d4. So let's play h3. Let's get rid of this bishop. It's a problem. If he takes, I play king takes. And yes, not the safest king, but I'm able to hide my king behind my pawns. And this is the reason why you don't push pawns on the side that your king is on. Because all of a sudden, my king's on the third rank. He's not able to attack my king because my king is hiding behind the pawns. Bishop to b4, my knight is guarded. His queen is no longer attacking b2. So I'm able to develop my bishop safely. He puts his knight on e7. I guess he wants to play knight f5, which is it is a strong move because it attacks my bishop. It applies pressure here. But let's go bishop to d3, actually. Let's just develop. We have to just finish our development as quickly as possible. Like, if all my pieces are active, it's going to be harder for him to even see that he has like a winning plan, you know? So rook to c8 is very strong. It's very strong because he's attacking my pawn twice, my knight twice. So rook to c1 guards it twice. So two defenders, two attackers, I'm safe. He needs to castle or play knight to f5. If he plays knight f5, I'm probably going to take because he has two attackers and I only have one defender. So it's either give up my bishop for the knight or just pull the bishop back. But he's attacking my e3 bishop anyway. So he decided to castle. Now that he castles, to get every piece in the game, I want to play king h1. King g3, king h2. There's pawn g4, but there's pawn f6. So let's play the move king to g3 first. Again, if someone's rook is on the same line as your king, do not think about it. Do not say, okay, the file is not open right now, so let's not worry about it. Don't be giving up your bishops for knights like this guy. Maybe he thinks after rook takes, he's gonna take here, but I'm just gonna play pawn takes. Maybe he's still gonna play queen b2, but then rook c2 guards the pawn. So the funny thing is, it's two bishops versus two knights. But because I got myself into trouble in the opening, I closed the position, and the open position actually favors the bishop. My pawn on c3 is under attack twice. I'm only guarding it once. So to get myself out of this problem, I'm going to play the move rook c2 because it's an attacking move. So he's not able to take my pawn on c3. So he's going to be forced to play something like queen to a3. So if he wants to continue to attack my pawn. But once he plays queen to a3, it's going to give me time to play something like queen to d2. And then I'm going to have two pieces guarding my pawn. I'm still defending though. He puts the queen here. Pawn c4, I'm not even thinking about that move. I don't know why I even tell you guys about that. But maybe bishop to d2 actually. Like, why use my queen as a defensive piece? I'm also thinking of bishop c1 because my bishop isn't really doing much anyways. Bishop c1, there's queen a5 though. Bishop c1, queen a5. Let's go with bishop c1. I don't really have too much confidence in bishop c1 because you shouldn't be pulling back your pieces like that. But there's actually a trick there. Queen a5. I'm thinking of playing queen to f3, just in the name of tricking him. Because then if he takes, I take, and then if queen takes, I take on h7. So queen to f3 is actually guarding my pawn on c3. And that's another thing. Like, I don't care what you guys say in the comments, but if you're in a losing position, sometimes you have to use tricks to get out of the losing position. And it's not hope chess. It's like the guy's attacking my pawn twice. Queen to f3 adds additional defenders to it, and he took it. I'm going to quickly take it because I want him to free move, not knowing that this is a discovered attack, by the way. The queen is on the same line as my queen, which means I'm able to take on h7 with check. And then once his king takes, I take on c3 and I win the queen. I mean, say all you want in the comment. Queen to f3. He resigns. More BONGCLOUD against 1,500 rated players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,500. Gonna be playing some BONGCLOUD madness. What will he play though? Like, a Scandinavian makes the BONGCLOUD hard. Because if I take queen takes king up, that's mate. And then if I play king up, I'm actually just down by a pawn. So this is going to be a very hard game because not only am I down by a pawn, my king is not doing anything. Oh my God. The guy did not take the pawn. And I was about to say the center is going to be open, but he voluntarily plays pawn to d4 to close the center. That's kind of crazy. That's kind of crazy, bro. Okay, let's play pawn to f4. Why am I playing pawn to f4 and not f3? I want to be able to play knight f3, but if I play knight f3, I can't hide my king on f2. So once I play knight f3, I'm going to be able to hide my king on f2, and that's how I'm going to be safe. Knight c6, let's go knight f3. Bishop to g4. Okay, everything is pinned, so let's continue with the plan. King to f2. If he gives up a bishop for a knight, that's on him. Now I'm just trying to develop my minor pieces. Like, there's no more issues here. Like, the guy get the perfect scenario. Okay, knight f6 is slightly annoying because I wanted to go bishop to g4. And if I play pawn to d3, I'm blocking out my bishop. And if I play pawn e4, there's a check. And then once I move the king, Yeah, this is kind of uncomfortable because he basically forced me to defend the pawn, which blocks out my bishop. So that's not bad. Now he needs to play e5. I mean, d4 just makes it very easy for me to say my king is safe. So another thing I'm trying to do is play bishop e2, move this knight out the way, trade off this bad bishop for this good bishop, and then my position is not going to be as bad. But no, my position is still slightly bad, but the opponent still has to punish it. Why is he playing unnecessary pawn moves in the opening stage of the game and he's 1500? Come on, bro. Let me just develop my bishop. Come on, bro. Unless the plan is to play g5. Like if he plays g5, it's not the best because he's blundering a pawn. But unless the plan is to play g5 and just try to get to my king, come on, bro. Ha, he played g5. I think he's reading my mind. If takes, I mean, it's a free pawn. A pawn is a pawn at the end of the day. This is very risky, by the way. And I think my opponent is making the right approach. Because once I takes, the reason why I'm taking is so that way my bishop is able to be developed. Like, I'm not trying to be greedy because my king is not the safest. So takes, bishop takes, my bishop is being developed. The funny thing is, his king is still in the center of the board, but I'm not going to try to open the center because my king is also not safe. So all I'm going to try to do is just complete the development of my pieces. So pawn takes, let's just take. It's funny because I should be the one who should have been done by a pawn, but he's now the one who is done by a pawn. So once I'm able to safely trade the pieces off the board, I should be fine. Bishop is on my half of the board. That's not a fork, by the way. His knight is guarding. I'm thinking about playing pawn to h3 to chase the bishop out of my half. But let's finish our development. Let's play knight a3. And again, do not put your knight on the edge of the board. Only put your knight on the edge of the board if the plan is to, oh my God, I just blundered. Ouch. I actually just blundered. So queen to d6 was actually targeting h2 and my knight was guarding h2. So he needed to take the knight, which is a removing the guard tactic. And then once I take the bishop, he takes on h2, but he missed it. I'm not going to play knight to b5 though. That was not the plan. The plan was to always play knight c4. Now my knight is no longer on the edge of the board. Now he has to pull his queen back. And he also has to be careful because I was about to say if queen back knight here wins material, but he could always just leave the queen hanging, take my bishop, and if I take his queen, he takes my queen. So that is never going to work. But I'm ahead by a pawn, so I'm still chilling. I'm expecting him to play queen to d7 here. Queen to e6 is not bad. He is blocking out his bishop, but I assume he has other plans for that bishop. Is it time to get that bishop out of our half of the board? Definitely. Okay, let's think about the opponent's forcing moves. Pawn push takes, knight takes, I takes. Doesn't work. Pawn push, check, takes, doesn't work. So let's get the bishop out of our half of the board. My major pieces are currently not doing anything, but eventually I'm going to try to get them in the game. For example, the f file, the f file, a rook could be on the f file. I'm not going to be going for any pawn breaks. Like, you guys are not going to be seeing me trying to open the position with pawn breaks. But these people need to understand the main thing to punish someone's king is in the center is if someone's king is in the center, open the center with pawn breaks. Like, if you guys don't know this, then hopefully you learned it from my BONGCLOUD video. So he's not trading, which is decent because he's down by a pawn. All my minor pieces are developed, which means I need to get my major pieces in the game. So let's play queen to d2, connect the rooks. Let's look on his forcing moves, doesn't do much. Queen d2, connect the rooks. And maybe I'm going to play rook to f1. Not sure which one of the rooks I'm going to be using. There's no attack on his king. That's the thing. If I want to start an attack on his king, I'm gonna have to play b4 followed by b5. Start a pawn storm. So it's either that or just play rook to f1. Let's see. Okay, that's not bad. Pawn to maybe it's bad because you shouldn't be pushing pawns on the side that your king is on. But I just felt a level of discomfort when he played that move. And if I pull my knight back to a3, he plays a6. My knight is stuck on the edge of the board. So I'm actually gonna play knight a4. And now if I play knight a4, he has to be careful because if he takes on my queen takes, b5 and a7 is going to be under attack. What he needs to do is play something like knight e5. So that way he could say, okay, I'm keeping your knight on the edge of the board. And the fact that he's pushing the pawn on the side that his king is on, it's giving me a hook. This is called a hook. Okay, he took on f3, so I guess he needs the e5 square for the knight. I mean, what if I take on c6 first? Queen takes c6, then I take on f3, and then my bishop is going to be on the same diagonal as his queen. Otherwise, I take hit the rook, he takes my bishop, I take the rook, and then I take the bishop. He has no good checks on my king. Unless if I takes and then he takes here. Nah, he's not going to do all of that. Yeah, let's just take the knight. The knight is on the edge of the board. Let's get rid of it. And then after queen takes, I takes. Queen is going to be on the same diagonal. Well, bishop is going to be on the same diagonal as his queen. So he took on c6. Let's take on c6. As I'm saying, my bishop is on the same diagonal as his queen, so he has to be careful. And it's funny how I was saying I'm not going to be using any pawn breaks, but pawn to a4 is a decent pawn break for me trying to open the position. Guys, don't be pushing pawns on the side that your king is on, man. Unless you have to do it, do not push pawns on the side that your king is on. So he pulls the knight back. I'm thinking of e5, which immediately hits the queen. But let's play a4 first. First, let's play a4. He's not developing, so I mean that's on him. And then, okay, the queen actually covers the a4 square, which is kind of weird. How did I not see that? But that's fine, because once he takes, I may just play pawn b3 to just sacrifice even more material. Because anytime he takes here, I'm going to be able to take on a7. And I was thinking about playing something like queen b4 or queen a5 to attack the pawn, but it's going to allow queen takes c2. But I think he needs to take. I think he has to take. So knight to e5 was played. Okay, knight e5 is not bad. He's basically saying you're never going to be able to push your pawn to e5. But now he has to be careful. He has to be careful not to lose any material. Let me show you guys what I'm talking about. Pawn takes b5 opens the file for my rook. So if he plays queen takes b5, not only am I winning a pawn, but because the queen and the knight is on the same rank, I'm able to do something that is called a skewer. Rook to a5, because the queen covers the a5 square. He's not able to, oh, I was about to say he's not able to move the queen anywhere that guards the knight, but he's able to do an in-between move. Does he know about in-between move at 1500? Take the bishop and attack my queen. And if I take his queen, he takes my queen. I take his knight and the position is equal. Well, I'll still be ahead by a pawn. He found it. He kind of had to find it, to be honest. He had to find it. I could do that, but because of the attack that I have on his king, it's weird. My king is actually safer than his. So let's take with the pawn. My rook guards the bishop. My queen guards the bishop. His pawn on a7 is hanging. If he moves the queen, I was thinking about rook a1 to just win the pawn, but I'm going to be leaving my h3 pawn unprotected. So maybe I'm still going to do it, but I have to be very careful. Okay, he decided to take a pawn on b2. A move that I was not expecting. But maybe he's trying to play queen to c3, which I understand because he's about to be attacked. And if you're going to be attacked, you need to start trading pieces off the board. So I understand why he would play a move like that. With that being said, let's just take on a7. So that way, if I have to trade the queens off the board, I could say that, okay, I'm ahead by a pawn, you know? So for example, queen here takes, swing the rook over. And then if he takes, maybe king here, rook b7. Oh, he's just running. He's just running. The guy's like, I'm out of here. He's just running away with the king. Okay. So what to do? Queen to c7 applies pressure to, well, queen to f4 applies pressure to c7, but I'm leaving my c2 pawn unprotected, which is actually super annoying. So let's play rook to a4 first. Rook to a4, not necessarily attacking the pawn because it's already guarded. I'm actually just trying to play rook c4. So f6 is very strong, very, very strong. Super strong. F6 is nice because after bishop f4, pawn e5, bishop g3, there's bishop h6 attacks the queen. And then after I move the queen, there's bishop e3. So let's do an in-between move. Let's play rook to b4 first. Rook to b4 hits the queen. Rook to b4 hits the queen, so he's not able to take my bishop. This is called danger levels, by the way. And then he kind of has to play queen c3. because if he puts the queen somewhere that doesn't guard the pawn, I'm just going to take the pawn. So it's kind of like a removing the guard tactic. So he found queen c3. Now I have to take the queen, but it's easier for me to move my bishop. So I could check and then grab the pawn. I think that's just winning, by the way, but let's just move the bishop out of the way. Let's just, yeah, I'm fine. If pawn e5, there's rook c4, and I'm winning the pawn. So this is a discovered attack on my rook. Let's play rook c4, where in the end game, we have to attack pawns. He develops the bishop to guard the pawn. He has less than a minute on the clock, by the way, but that's just a free bishop, bro. Like, come on. Now I have a pass pawn. He's trying to get his rook on my second rank, so let's go back to c4, and then I'm going to take on c3. If he guards the c3 pawn, which he didn't, so let's just take the pawn. And I wanted to say my plan from here is to start rolling the pawns up the board. He puts one rook on my second rank attacking the pawn. So let's play king e2. So that way, if another gets to my second rank, I'm able to play king d2, guard the pawn. He didn't do that. He decides to move the king away from guarding the pawn. That's called a drawback mistake. Let's take on c7. And then once he moves the king again, now we start rolling the pawns up the pawn up the board because pass pawns must be pushed. Rook to a2, let's guard the pawn. Two attackers, two defenders. So now we're just going to be rolling the pawn up the board. No. I actually have a quicker plan. I think I could try to checkmate his king. Yeah. If I play rook to g1, rook to g1 threatens a checkmate in two moves. For example, after pawn to checkmate, there's mating 2 here. I'm going to start by checking on c5. King can't go here, so the king has to go here. And then rook to g1 is going to be a checkmate. So once the king moves, it's just a checkmate. More BONGCLOUD against 1,600 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,600. Let's do some more BONGCLOUD. And this is the Caracan. How I like to play the BONGCLOUD against the Caracan is to ensure that I close the position. So after something like pawn to d5, I play pawn to e5 and just keep it closed. And what the opponent needs to do, he needs to open the position. Okay, that was not it, bro. That was not it. I mean, knight f3 blocks the check, but I'm going to play pawn f3 just so that way he has to move the bishop more than once. And then I'm also going to be able to hide my king on the f2 square. But it's going to be harder for me to develop my knight. So bishop to f4, let's play pawn d4. I'm going to play king to f2 eventually. So pawn e6, let's play king f2 so that way my light squared bishop is able to be developed. This guy's just, he's playing every check that he gets. That doesn't work, bro, because I'm guarding this. So now pawn to g3 just blocks the check. This check is actually giving me tempo, by the way. I hope he's able to see that I'm just gaining tempo with these checks. And then he just pulls it. Okay, let's play h4. I'm breaking principles, by the way. And I knew he was going to fall for it. I'm not winning. He's losing a bishop. How is he losing a bishop? Pawn to g4. Because once I hit him with pawn to g4, okay, if he takes the pawn, I take the bishop. If he pulls the bishop back, I trap the bishop with pawn to h5. And that's why I played pawn to h4. So he decided to just sacrifice the bishop. Let's just take the bishop. And it's crazy for me to say 10 moves in the BONGCLOUD, I'm ahead by a piece, but it's true. I'm not going to take with the... Wait, think. Yeah. I'm not going to take with the queen because knight c6 is a tempo. I'm able to play bishop to b5 though, but I'm just not comfortable with the fact that my queen and my king is going to be on the same diagonal. So let's just use the time to develop. Like the pawn on d4 is a dead pawn. Eventually, I'm going to be able to take the pawn. Like my goal from here is to start trading. So any knight goes to b6, I'm just going to play bishop to b5 and just take the knight. So pawn a6, let's just take the knight. And then once he takes back, no, I'm going to take. Well, I could actually take with the queen though, because it's kind of impossible for a bishop to get to. Yeah, let's do that. No, I'm going to. Nah, pawn c5 is coming. I think pawn c5 is coming regardless though. Like once I don't get pinned, I should be fine. So maybe he plays something like queen to a5, which would try to threaten bishop to c5. Which would be embarrassing if I fell for that. But if queen to a5 threatening bishop to c5, I'm going to play bishop to e3. I think he needs to play pawn c4. No. If pawn c5, queen a4, and I'm forcing the queens off the board. So he plays pawn to f6, but Now is not the time when opening the position is going to help him, to be honest. Like if he takes, I'm just going to take. So let's just develop normally here. Maybe takes first, but nah, let's develop the knight actually. Let's develop the knight. If he takes, my knight takes. If queen a5, my bishop goes to e3. No, but then there's pawn to c5 followed by pawn to d4. It's weird. Let's see what he plays. Yeah, he plays queen a5. So queen a5, bishop e3, pawn c5, queen a4, check. Get the queens off the board. Or I could take on f6. If bishop c5, I take on g7. He takes with check, I takes, and I'm gonna take. But that's hope chess, to be honest. So let's play bishop e3, pawn c5, queen a4, get the queens off the board. And if he attacks the bishop, I just move. Let's do that. Yeah, let's do that. Let's not fall for that. So there's no bishop c5, and pawn c5 is what he needs to play. No. And if he plays pawn c5, I play queen a4, which forces the queens off the board. Whenever you're ahead in material, you should be trading pieces. If you're able to force the pieces off the board with checks like this, then that's good. My bishop is under attack, but I'm just going to move. It doesn't really matter where I put the bishop. Let's pull the bishop back to d2. Maybe it does something over here. Now I just need to get my rooks in the game. Like once my rooks joins the game, then I'm just completely winning. It's crazy. I don't want you guys to be playing any BONGCLOUD now. Don't be playing any BONGCLOUD. I'm just doing this so that way you guys could see how I get out of losing positions. Bishop to d6 attacks the knight. Knight c4 is actually what I'm thinking of. In fact, let's play knight c4. It's like offense is the best defense. I move my knight out the way and I attack the bishop, and I'm trying to trade. Like I was about to say, rook to e1 guards the knight and swing the rook in the game, but he should not be trading. So once he pulls the bishop back, now I play rook to e1, swinging my rook in the game, and I'm attacking this pawn. Not using this rook, by the way, because I'm not trying to blunder this. If knight f6, it attacks my pawn, but king to g3 just guards the pawn. And then I'm also guarding this pawn, which means I'm going to be able to swing my eighth rook in the game. So yeah, this is just winning. So he did play knight f6. Let's not be too greedy and take the pawn. Let's play king to g3, guarding the pawn. Then we're going to try to win this pawn. Because as I've been saying, if you're in the end game and you're winning, your goal is not to trade pawns. Your goal is to win pawns. So he castles the king. No, we take the pawn on e6. His bishop is also under attack. I was just checking to see if he has any checks on my king, which he doesn't, which means I'm just going to be swinging my rook over to e1. And then, yeah, I'm just chilling here, to be honest. And yes, knight does not belong on the edge of the board. You should not put your knight on the edge of the board unless the plan is to take them off the edge of the board. But let's get more pieces in the game first. And then once I feel as if every piece is in the game, that's when I'm going to play maybe knight b6. Okay, now that he pulls the bishop back, it's a no-brainer. I'm ahead by 3 points. I'm just going to trade pieces off the board without thinking. And that's why he didn't take with the rook. Because if he takes with the rook, he makes it way easier for me. And now I'm going to play knight b6. Now is the time to get the knight off the edge of the board. And if he plays rook to b7, hit him with knight to d7, forking the rook on the bishop, which means it's going to be helping me to trade even more pieces off the board. So rook to d8 was played. He didn't go for that, but let's go bishop to g5 and attack the rook. Basically forcing the rook to b8, then i4. This is like a removing the guard tactic because the rook has to stay guarding the knight. Unless he plays knight f6, bishops are better than knights, do not care. We're ahead by 3 points. Doesn't matter. Then once he takes, okay, how am I going to win this? Maybe, yeah, let's play king to f4. We have to get the king in the game as well. Like, king activity is crucial in the end game. And there's no, well, I was about to say there's no possible checks, but he could check here. I just blocked the check though. He's not able to check here because I'm just going to take. Pawn to d3 is something. Because if I takes, the rook is active. So let's not take. Let's play pawn to c3. And if he thinks pawn to d2 is going to help him to get any attack or get any pass pawn, rook to d1 is just going to win the pawn, which means I now have a new plan, which is to get this pawn, which is very easy to attack because he doesn't have enough pieces to guard it. So, for example, rook to d1 just wins the pawn. There's nothing he could do. We saw the check. Pawn to g3 just blocks. Hit the bishop. Bishop has to move. Take the pawn. This is just winning. If he checks with the rook, I just move. It's the same thing. I'm just going to take the pawn on the next move. And the opponent resigns. More BONGCLOUD against 1,700 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,700. Playing some. Why is everybody playing the French defense? Let's go king to e2 though. Playing some BONGCLOUD, having some fun. Let's see how 1,700 is going to punish me. And as I've been talking about, we don't open the position. We play e5 so that we were able to close the position. Black needs to open the position. And for some reason, I've been facing this so much in the speed run. So I don't need to explain why I'm going to play f4. But if you haven't seen it, it's to play king to f2. And I'm also trying to put my knight on f3. So knight to c6, knight to f3. Once I put my king on f2, my king is going to be safe. Ah, finally someone knows what they're doing. The guy played immediate f6, trying to open the position. Okay, I have to hide my king here. Let's hide the king on f2 so that way I can develop my bishop. So I'm expecting takes, takes. Maybe he can also just put his knight on f5. So he did take. If I takes, knight takes, takes, there's no queen check. Wait, takes. Okay, that's probably a move. Knight takes, queen check, king g1, queen to d4 is checkmate. Oh, he missed it. Oof, he missed it. Well, okay, how do we continue our development? I like the idea of playing pawn c3 followed by pawn d4. So let's try that. Let's go pawn c3. Usually, we don't want to rush playing pawn to d4. Like, again, I think this guy's doing everything correctly. I mean, except missing, missed knight takes e5. But if the knight goes to f5 and I play d4, takes, takes, queen b6, and I'm actually losing in that scenario. So I may have to play knight a3 to c2 before I play pawn to d4. Or I may have to just play bishop to d3, rook e1, king g1, artificially castle my king, and then play some chess. Pawn to d4 is actually not a move that I'm afraid of because it weakens the c4 and the e4 square. And even though those squares already belong to me, I couldn't have gotten any of my pieces there. So now I'm going to put my knight on the edge of the board. And what I've been saying a lot is do not put your knight on the edge of the board. But the reason why I'm putting my knight on the edge of the board is it's the only square for the knight. That's one. And two, the plan is not to keep it on the edge of the board. The knight is heading to c4. From c4, it targets the d6 square, and I'm probably just going to leave it on c4. There's one thing that I'm slightly afraid of, and that's when I put the knight on c4, there's immediate pawn b4, which attacks the knight. So I would love to put the knight on c4 and then play pawn to a4, so that way he's not able to play pawn to b5 and attack the knight. And I'm also thinking of just putting the bishop on d3 for the time being and just not. Okay, I was not expecting pawn to d3. The guy's just like, yo, you're not going to develop your bishop. That's kind of crazy, actually. How am I going to move this bishop? All right, we're in a tricky position. All right, let's get creative. Knight c4, I have to play. So let's not think too much. Knight c4 guards the pawn, threatens knight d6. So I'm expecting knight f5. Knight f5, we can't allow pawn to b5. So I'm going to play pawn to a4 and okay, he puts the knight on g6. So it's not a huge difference, but the knight is actually not as active on g6 because once I play pawn to g3, the knight will not have any forward moves. Plus, my bishop can also go to g2. So could say I'm chilling. Queen d5 is going to be three pieces attacking my pawn. So if I play a4, he plays queen d5, hits the knight. Oh, but then I have knight e3 hits the queen because I was thinking about playing queen to b3. But let's play a4. If queen d5, there's three attackers. I only have two defenders, so I'm going to be forced to play knight e3, which hits the queen. But I'm also probably going to be losing the pawn on e5. So yes, it's a losing position against a 1700, but he still has to ensure that he plays it precisely. I don't remember the name of the grandmaster. I'm sure someone in the comment is going to tell me. But a GM says the hardest game to win is a one game. because conversion is not the easiest thing to do in chess. If I was able to, okay, I have a plan. I actually have a plan. It's hard though. It takes too long. I want to play b3, bishop b2, queen b1, and then take. But he's just gonna castle, and then this is gonna be under attack. So I'm gonna have to play h4 takes h3. I'm gonna have to play h3, and once he castles, I play king to g3. Maybe takes t. Yeah, it's losing. This is this is losing in every way. Oh, queenie one. Wait, queenie one, queenie four. No, queenie. Yeah, let's go queenie one. Queenie one, queenie four hits the pawn. Yo, that, I had to find that. But if he let's say he castles, if he castles, I go queenie four, queenie four, and that's two attackers on the pawn. So I think he has to be careful. Maybe he has to play queen to the. Okay, false alarm. If I play queen e4, there's rook f5, and wait, queen e4, rook f4, there's queen d3. But maybe I'm just gonna put the queen on e3 just because. The thing is, there's queen e4. If he checks pawn g3, if he takes, knight takes, queen takes. Queen e3. If bishop g5, there's queen d3. This is the way. All right, let's focus. I want to play queen takes d3. I'm trying to get the queens off the board as quickly as possible. Remember what I tell you guys, if you're being attacked, you have to trade the pieces off the board, especially the attacking pieces. The thing is, if I takes, he's able to take on e5, knight e5, because after knight e5, my knight on f3 is pinned. So maybe I have to play bishop takes and just get rid of the knight on g6. Bishops are better than knights, but whenever someone is attacking you, just get rid of the pieces. Just get rid of the pieces. Rook f5, rook f5. I take it the rook. Knight f4. Oh, there is knight f4. Knight f4, pawn g3, knight h3. I takes. Knight f4, pawn g3, knight d5 hits the queen, but then there's queen takes. Am I just win? Am I just winning the pawn? It's if I'm just winning the pawn, then I'm chill to be honest. But let's see. He's thinking. I like that. I think what he needs to do is bishop g5. Oh no, bishop g5. There's queen c5. Because what I was saying is bishop g5, queen d3, bishop d3, knight e5, knight e5, knight e5, because my knight on f3 is pinned. So that's one line. But the fact that he's thinking is just good news to me. So he did went for the bishop g5 idea. And it looks as if I have two pieces on the square, but I don't. If I take on d3, once the queen is traded, he's going to take on e5. With that being said, we're taking on c5. This is drawback. Moving the bishop to g5 left the c pawn unprotected. So if queen takes, knight takes, knight takes, knight takes, my queen will still be guarding the pawn. If queen takes, bishop h4 check, pawn g3, sack the rook takes, um, not really seeing what that gives him. It looks dangerous though, but not really seeing what it gives him. Yeah, I'm not really seeing it, but it's very dangerous, especially if there's some b6, bishop b7 idea. But let's just go ahead and take the pawn. I mean, it's a very risky position. Damn near losing. King g1 also allows my knight to actually guard the pawn, but I don't really want to play king g1 because then my rook is gonna be hard to join the game. And I know the position is getting tactical, so let me just remind myself, always ensure that we're looking for any possible checks that the opponent has, any forcing moves that the opponent has, any possible way for the opponent to check our king, take something, or put a piece on our half of the board. I have to ensure that I keep those under wraps. I'm ahead by a pawn, but I'm not chilling. And the reason why I'm not chilling is because I'm severely behind in development. Like his rook is already active. This rook is very easy for this rook to join the game. All his pieces are active. But if I'm able to find a way to win this pawn, maybe queen d6, force the queens off the board, bishop takes d3. If I'm able to do that, then I will be winning. But he's thinking. Keep thinking. Okay, check. I knew I said I was gonna block the check, but I'm actually thinking of playing king to g1 because blocking the check, I just like I don't think it works, but I'm just afraid of that sacrifice. So let's say I block the check, right? Let's say I block the check. I need to be aware of knight takes e5, knight takes e5, bishop f2 wins my queen. So king g1, knight e5, knight e5 with this knight, and if knight e5, queen e5. King g1, rook f3 takes check. That's mate. Okay, we can't play king g1. What I'm doing is also called the principle of the something another elimination, the method of elimination, or something like that. The process of elimination. Yeah. Okay, pawn g3, rook takes, king takes, and then we need to look for follow-up checks. There's no checks there. There's no checks there. Captures. If he takes with check, I play knight takes, and if he takes, I play queen takes. Something about this is working, but I have to block. I'm not sure if he's able to find it, but let's block. Yeah, this is what happens when you don't develop your pieces. But like I kind of want to keep my bishop on f1 so that way I'm able to take this pawn. But if I can just play bishop g2 to guard my knight, I'd be grateful, to be honest. He's still thinking though. That's the thing. He's thinking. Ah, he pulls the bishop all the way back to e7. Guy's bluffing. Guys are bluff. Which means once I pull my queen back to, let's just do it quickly because he's thinking, burn time. If he puts the bishop on g5, now I go to e4. Nah, I just take the pawn. No, 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 no. I mean, I could take the pawn and give him back the pawn so that way I trade the queens. But okay, pawn to b6. They say this guy knows how to play chess. You see, he's now getting the bishop. He wants to put his bishop here. But let's say I take, and then I'm be like, oh no, I can't take, can't take. Okay, bishop takes. If I play bishop takes, that's a free pawn. And then once he puts his bishop on the diagonal, I intercept him with bishop e4. Does that work though? Because there's knight takes, knight takes, knight takes. And if I take the bishop, there's check, wins the queen. Backside. Wait. So bishop, wait. Bishop d3, bishop b7. Just get rid of the knight then, bro. Yeah, just bishop takes, bishop b7. Just get rid of the knight. And then once he takes, um, all right, I'm gonna flag him. Let's just take. Let's just take. I need to get my. If I play king g2, his bishop is still on the diagonal. So maybe I need to play king e2 because I need to. Oh, that was why you played b6. I thought you wanted bishop here. Okay, let's get into flagging mode. This is just so embarrassing. Oh my god. If I take the knight, he takes the queen. I take with the king, he takes, and then I play d4. Okay, let's take. We're in flagging mode now. So takes, d4. Queen d5, I pull the knight back, guard everything. Bishop b7 is winning. Pawn c4 hits the queen. But then yo, what is this guy doing? How is he finding these moves? Okay, pawn b4. We're in flagging mode. I'm threatening to fork. He pulls the knight back. He's trying to check. I go king back. So let's. But then if I hit the bishop, he has this. Oh God, God, God. So check, king back. b4, bishop back. Can't do that. Knight e4. Let's go rook here. Ah, it's just embarrassing because I was actually, I mean, I was losing, but I didn't see a simple tactic, man. Okay, knight e4 guards the pawn. I'm still on the same line as this. Bishop b3. Oh boy. Knight d6 hits the rook. Rook. Oh, knight takes. Oh God. Oh God. That's mate. Good game. Good game. Good game. Ay, ay, ay. Good game. Ah, more BONGCLOUD against 1800 players. Stick around. The opponent is now 1800. There's no way I'm losing two consecutive games. Impossible. Let's do some BONGCLOUD. Okay, see, the high rated guys knows. You see how quickly he just plays d5 without even developing anything. Let's take though. Let's just take it, and then after queen takes, knight c3 hits the queen. So I'm still forcing the queen to move. Still gonna force the queen to move. Queen e4 would have been mate if the knight doesn't guard the square, but the queen has to move. Okay, so the queen went back to e3. Position is a bit open. If I play knight f3, he's gonna hit me with e5. Pawn d4, he's gonna take. Ay 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 ay. Okay, let's go back. Let's go back to e1. This is crazy. This is crazy. So my king is on e1, but it's not able to get castle. That's the thing. And then pawn a6 prevents this check. I just need to develop. That's all I need. Knight f3, pawn g4, knight g4. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. Bishop d3 doesn't work. Knight f3 doesn't work. Okay, let's play pawn to d3. We have to block out the bishop. We have to block out the bishop. So it's knight f3, knight f3, maybe just knight e2 actually, because I have to try to be a bit reserved, you know? So I'm thinking f5, he's doing what he needs to do. For some reason, I prefer my knight on f3. Let's just go. Oh, I was just about to say, let's just go knight f3, bishop e2, and castle. And then I forgot that I'm not able to get castle. Hmm, how do I do this? I'm just going to try to play the position with the king in the center. Let's see. So knight c6, let's go bishop e2. We're still developing regardless. I'm not able to get castle, but I'm still developing. And I'm also thinking of pawn d4. Like pawn d4, even though it opens the position. So pawn d4, if pawn e5, I have pawn d5. There's knight g4 as well. If bishop e3, pawn f5. I don't know what to do here. This is like I'm losing. Okay, I'm gonna start playing for tricks. Pawn d4, pawn e5, pawn d4, pawn e4, pawn d5 hits the queen. Queen move, grab, grab, grab. Let's do that. Pawn d4. I think he needs to just open the position. I don't want the position to be open. So it's kind of weird. If he plays e4, I play d5. I can't believe I lost that 1700 game though. Like I know that I was already losing, but it's just the fact that I didn't see that he was threatening to just pin my queen. So he took the pawn. We have to take back. And then if he takes, we play queen takes. And even though I'm not able to get like if I could play something like f3, king f2, rook e1, that wouldn't be too bad. So let's take on d4, assuming he's gonna play knight to f6. And I'm gonna trick him. I'm gonna move my king, and then if he castles, I play bishop c4, and then he's gonna be pinned. All right, bishop e5. Bishop e5 was played very early. Where do we put the queen? I mean, queen c4. Queen c. Okay, not queen d5. Queen d5 blunders the queen. Queen h4. There's also queen h4. I want to be able to play bishop c4. That's the thing. Trying to trick the guy. So let's try queen h4. I want my queen to keep the defense of the c4 square because I'm kind of assuming he's gonna castle, and then I'm gonna pin his queen once he castles. So that's one thing I have up my sleeve. The other thing is just to play bishop d2, guard the knight, because he may want to take and then double up my pawns. Okay, he did that very quickly. He gave up the bishop for the knight very, very quickly. And then queen to c6 is just, that's just nice. It's a fork. He's attacking g2 and c3. But, okay, I have to lose one of these pawns. So what am I going to do? I'm going to choose to lose the c3 pawn. So king f1, because I can't castle. I mean, there's no bishop f3 because check. Damn, there's no tricks. So king f1, queen takes, hits the rook. Rook b1, queen takes, hits the rook again. And then I'm losing. So maybe I need to save the sword. Okay, calm down, calm down. How do we do this? I'm so weak. It's just queen g3. Queen g3 guards both g2 and c3. What am I saying? And I'm attacking g7. That's kind of crazy. As it's this the 1700 game is just it's affecting me mentally. That's what's happening. You know what the funny thing is? I'm not as comfortable as I'm acting because he's also not castling his king, which is kind of weird. Bishop f4 hits f7. Bishop f4, maybe knight f6, bishop e5 castles. Like I'm trying to I don't think winning a pawn is gonna fix my worries here though. That's the thing. There's also bishop a3 trying to prevent him from castling once he plays knight f6. There's pawn c4, knight f6. Oh, why am I playing so badly today? It's embarrassing. The king is exposed, the rook is unprotected. Queen e5, that's just a free rook. Check. Blocks with the queen takes the rook, blocks with the knight takes the rook, moves the king take the rook. Let's keep going. The funny thing is, once I take the rook, I'm still going to be guarding my c3 pawn. I need to get my head in the game, man. That 1700 guy is doing something to me. So maybe he needs to block with the bishop. I takes castle, and then I just run back out because I'm not trying to get my queen trapped. There's also bishop to f3 hits the queen, but let's see. I'm just winning here. He just completely blundered. So he blocks with the bishop. Let's grab the rook. We're ahead by 5 points. And then if he castles the king, which is what he needs to do, I'm probably gonna go bishop f3 hits the queen. Yeah. Uh-huh. That's what I'm gonna play. Oh no, no. There's queen g2. I forgot about queen g2. I have to play rook f1 first. Let's just get that out of the way. Have to play rook f1. Now if he castles, bishop g5 doesn't work. I like queen e5 hits the bishop, but let's play bishop f4 first. So that way, once I play queen e5, I threatens the bishop and I threaten mate. That's my new plan. Maybe he goes knight e7, trying to be slick, but that's probably losing because c7 is weak and then e6 is unprotected. I mean, pawn to g5 wouldn't be a terrible move. Maybe if he plays pawn g5, I'll still go back to e5. And then if he takes, I take with check, but then f3 becomes possible, and that's too much drama. So if he plays g5, I'm probably gonna move my bishop. I'm not sure yet, though. Maybe. Wait. Knight e7, queen e5, knight d5 hits the bishop and guard the pawn, but then I take with check. Queen e5 and it's GG's, bro. Because I'm threatening checkmate and I'm attacking your unprotected bishop. It's over. Oh, never mind. I'm playing so weak today. I didn't even see queen back to f c6. Okay, but what if I play bishop to f3 though? No, bishop f3, there's queen b6. Yo, this is getting out of hand. Maybe bishop g. No, maybe rook d1. Has to be rook d1. Has to be rook d1. Or maybe bishop f3, then rook d1. Nah, rook d1. We're ahead by a rook. We have to trade. Yeah, let's just trade the pieces off the board because my my head is not here today. Like I'm not seeing stuff. The thing is, it's kind of hard to play from like a losing position. And I'm not saying I'm losing, but even though I'm ahead by a rook, what is the rook doing? It's just not doing anything on f1. So it's the good thing is there's no way for him to win right now. So that's why I think I'm still winning. Because I'm gonna get the pieces off the board, whether he likes it or not. Knight d5 makes sense. Like he's trying not to trade. But once I hit him with c4, he has no checks on my king. Maybe he takes on f4, but I trade first, then I take. Then I could say it's GG's. So okay, what am I missing? Am I missing anything? No. Pawn c4. Nice. I need to just double check sometimes because I'm not seeing everything. So he took. Let's trade first. We have to trade. Then we take on f4. Still not missing anything. He has no checks. If I could just get the queens off the board, then it's over. He has under a minute on the clock. Queen to b6. Maybe he's trying to check here. So I'm going to play pawn to f3. Nice move. Nice move. Pawn f3. If he checks, I just run. And then my rook joins the game. Yeah, king f2. He's also panicking. His time is running out. Rook joins the game with check. King has to move. Then swoop over the queen like this. Boom. Now I'm threatening mate. So he has to push one of those pawns. Yeah, I think he has to push the b pawn. He found it. Let's go rook d2, hit the queen. Just force the queen out of our half. And then I play f3. I'm trying to get my bishop on this diagonal. So that way, once I play queen to d8, it becomes a checkmate. Or maybe I could check, king up, check, king over mate, and if he blocks with the pawn, not sure. So let's just go bishop f3. Now I'm threatening checkmate in one move. He also has no time on the clock, and I'm down. Andy's down by a rook, so this is completely winning. Okay, queen c5. He's just trading the pieces off the board, but he has no time, so we're also just gonna be winning on time as well. And he resigns. But more BONGCLOUD against 1900 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1900. The disrespectful BONGCLOUD opening. It's always funny when they take some time before they play their move. Okay, how am I going to be beating a 1900 with the BONGCLOUD? First of all, my king is not safe. Which means I'm not trying to open the position. So I'm going to play pawn to e5 to keep the position closed. Because what we know about chess is if someone's king is in the center of the board, the goal is to open the center. So with my king chilling here, I'm going to try to close the position a bit. So now I'm going to play f4 just to keep it close. And because my bishop is not able to move, I'm thinking about putting the king on f2. And then once the king is chilling on f2, then I should be able to play some regular chess. So now the king is on f2. I don't think my king is unsafe. I think black is maybe slightly better, but let's see. How am I going to try to gain an advantage? First, I'm going to be developing my knight because it's still very important that we develop all our pieces. And then he plays f6, which is a very good move, by the way, because he's basically trying to open the position. Now, to take is still a mistake, not because we played the BONGCLOUD. So after we take, I'm just going to be helping his knight to get developed, which means I want him to take so that way when I take back, his knight is still not able to get to the f6 square. With that being said, I'm thinking of pawn c3. Yeah, let's play pawn c3 followed by pawn d4. If I'm able to get this little pawn chain, like a pawn on c3, a pawn on d4, then I should be doing fine. So queen is on the same line as my king. Pawn to d4, takes, and then my pawn on d4 is going to be very weak. Takes, and then the knight is coming to the f5 square. So now I'm thinking about not playing pawn to d4. Or I'm going to break another opening principle, knight a3. Now I'm putting my knight on the edge of the board. But why am I putting my knight on the edge of the board? I'm actually trying to put the knight on c2 because I'm trying to play d4. And the pawn on d4 is going to be very weak. Like the queen, the knight, a knight is also coming to f5 to attacking the pawn. So it's going to be very, very weak. So with my knight on c2, it protects d4. But then he decides to play pawn to c4 with check, which I wasn't expecting him to play that move, to be honest. That's a nice move. Because now if I play d4, he's going to en passant with check, and then I have to move the king anyways. Oh boy, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Why did you guys vote for this opening? It's kind of weird. Hmm. Okay, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's go d4. Oh, he didn't en passant. That's crazy. He should have en passant with check. He actually decided to give up his bishop for a knight. Let's just take. So, I mean, I don't think I'm losing anymore. Like I have double pawns, but I have the bishop here. My king is not castled, but it's on f2. Like the queen is on the same line as my king. That's the only thing I need to be a bit careful about. I think he needs to play knight e7 and castle. If he plays knight e7, maybe he thinks if he plays knight e7, I'm just going to take. But that's actually good for black. So if he still decides to play knight e7, I'm probably, well, I'm thinking of bishop e3, but my pawn is too weak. So he took first. I have to take back. Then he's going to play knight e7. Maybe knight e7 to f5. Okay, he castled on the queen side, which means he's going to try to start an attack on my king. I'm thinking bishop g5 hits the rook, but then there's rook to f8, rook to b1 hits the queen, but then there's queen a5, and that's a fork. Oh boy, how am I gonna get out of this? We have to develop though. We have to just get the pieces out. So maybe just bishop to e2. It doesn't really do much, but it gets a piece off the background. I can do something like artificially castling, like rook f1, king g1. If I play rook f1, king g1, then it's a normal position. Black is just going to be ahead by like so much tempo. So rook to f1, putting my rook on the file, and then king to g1 is my next move. But it all depends on what he plays. Because if he plays knight g6, which he did, it means he's attacking my pawn on e5 twice. And the reason why he's attacking my pawn on e5 twice is my pawn on d4 is actually pinned. So if king g1, knight takes, knight takes, knight takes. So what if I play king g3? My king is actually surprisingly safe on the g3 square, which is crazy because now he's not able to take because it's just going to be a free knight. I'm assuming he's going to play like h5 and, just go after my king. But h5 actually weakens his king side because then a knight is easily placed on the g5 square. The question is, one thing I want to let you guys know when it comes to bishops is you want to get your bishop outside of the pawn chain. So I'm thinking about pawn a4, bishop a3, rook b1, maybe bishop c5 to start an attack. There's also h4, h5. Let's go with a4. A4 is to go bishop a3, rook b1. So he pulls the queen back to d8, which makes so much sense because obviously he's trying to pull his queen. I'm going to try my best not to lose any game in this one, but I don't think that's possible. I mean, even if I play bishop to a3 hits the rook, I'm assuming he's gonna play rook f4, then I go back to hit the rook. Yeah, let's do that. Let's go. Bishop a3 hits the rook. Where will he put the rook? My king is not safe, but I'm gonna play h3, king h2, and then my king is gonna be fine. If he puts the rook on f4, I go back with the bishop. And if he pulls the rook back on f8, then I play h3. Because even though I'm losing, I still don't want to draw. Because we're trying to see if we're able to win from losing positions. Basically, no theory, no nothing. Wait, that was a possibility? This I'm always falling for these. Like, let me tell you guys one more time. Let me tell you guys one more time. Always consider the opponent's forcing moves. Always. Okay. Rook takes f3, check. If bishop takes f3, queen to h4 is mate. If rook takes f3, queen to h4 is mate. If king takes f3, okay. Okay, because if check, there's takes. So king f3, maybe queen g5. Okay, what if I play pawn f3? Pawn f3, queen h4, king g2, knight f4, king h1, queen h3. Then after queen h3, rook f2 guards the mate. Maybe I'm not getting checkmated actually. It's either pawn f3 or king f3. King f3 is the weirdest one. King f3, there's no queen check, and if knight check, there's king f2 to g1. King f3, assuming he's gonna play queen h4, and then after queen h4, I can't play king f2, and if g3, there's queen takes h2. Oh, but queen takes h2, rook h1 traps the queen. So king f3, maybe queen g5, then there's king f2. Damn, I did not see that move. King f2. Okay, let's just go king f2. Let's go king f2, and if the rook check I takes, and then if the queen check I play king over, and I'm not getting mated. It's kind of weird. I did not see that move. But if you guys are not learning anything, just always ensure that you're considering the opponent's forcing moves, which means knight takes e5 check. I have to consider this as a forcing move. But if knight e5, pawn e5, knight e5, the plan is just to play king f2, king g1. So that's the defensive idea. King f2, king g1. If I'm able to play king f2, king g1, then I'm not going to be getting checkmated, and I'm going to be ahead by 2 points. So let's see. So we did consider queen h4 because it's a move on our half of the board. Any rook check will be met with bishop take. So we're basically in a defensive position. Whenever you're in a defensive position, we're now looking on the possible checks that the opponent has. So queen f4 is the third. That's checkmate. Pawn g3, if queen takes h2, rook h1 actually traps the queen. Luckily, I mean, if rook check I takes, and if knight e5 I takes, knight e5, king f2, queen is still trapped. So pawn g3, there's queen e4. I'm not missing another check that he has. Pawn g3. If the queen checks here, I go back. If the queen checks here, I go back, and I'm just going to g1 on the next move, basically. So let's play pawn g3. That was the plan. Let's keep on sacrifice more material. Let's see if he's gonna sacrifice his knight. This is weird. Okay, queen to h3, I actually did not consider. The good thing is, if he plays queen to h3, I think I'm going to have some breathing room to, I don't know, just do something. Because if he checks here, I go back. If he takes, I trap the queen. So, for example, queen h3, rook f2 threatens bishop f1. trying to chase away the queen. I don't think I'm losing here. Let's see though. Let's see. My bishop on a3 is like completely saving my position here. Okay, he checks king f2. That's the only score for the king. So let's not think about it. King to g1 is the next move. There's also bishop to f3, which attacks the queen. And again, there's no forcing moves. Well, there's one more check. I'm thinking of playing queen to b queen to b1 wins. Queen to b1 actually wins the game because I'm ahead by 2 points. If you're ahead in material, the goal is to start trading pieces off the board. So if I put my queen on b1, he has to trade queens. The queen has nowhere to go. The queen is technically trapped, right? Can't go here, can't go here, can't go here, can't go here, here. So queen to b1, just get the queens off the board. Once we get the queens off the board, I'm chilling. Unless he wants to put like a knight on b4. Queen b1, but it automatically attacks the queen. Yeah. Queen b1 concludes the game. Yeah, it's crazy. Like Gary Kasparov says, if you want to be really good at chess, you have to learn how to fight from losing positions. Like those other opening videos that I've been making, you just you catch them in the opening, trade the pieces off the board, and then you win. But these games I've been losing from the openings. So we still have to be creative. So he traded, obviously. Let's play rook takes, put the rook on the file. My pawn on a4 is unprotected, it's isolated, and he pull his knight back to a7 because he wants to take the pawn on the next move. But here's what I'm gonna do, because offense is the best defense. The move that I'm definitely gonna play is bishop to d1 and guard my pawn. But because his knight is unprotected, I'm first gonna go bishop to c5 and attack the unprotected knight. So that way, if he decides to put the knight on c6, I'm no longer under attack. I was gonna say if he plays king to b1, I'm just gonna take the knight. Because why are we not gonna trade if we're ahead in material? Just take the knight, bishop d1, or rook to b6. Rook to b6, if he takes this pawn, then I take this pawn. And I'm basically trading, like the winning side shouldn't be trading. Okay, let's just play. Talking too much. Talking just a bit too much. But the winning side should not be trading pawns. But this is like a dead pawn. I mean, bishop d1 guards it. So he plays bishop c6. Now we're doubling up our rooks on the file. Things could get crazy here. I mean, I'm never going to be able to take here, but maybe in some universe I could take here if he moves the knight away, And there's still no checks on my king. There's no rook checks. This pawn on e6 is now unprotected. So bishop to g4 is definitely a move. He literally, like, I'm not trying to play hope chess, but he literally plays the only move that I wanted him to play. Because the rooks are on the same line as the king and pin pieces does not protect, rook takes c6 is just a free bishop. The pawn is not able to take the rook due to this pin. And then if he moves the king, I'm going to move my rook. And this pawn is still unprotected. I'm now ahead by 5 points. Do not play the BONGCLOUD though. So he moves the king out the way. And now I'm just going to grab this free pawn. We're now ahead by 6 points. The only way in which he could win this game is now by time. Bishop to f3 also attacks the pawn on d5. So pawn to b6, I have like 3 pieces on the square. He only has the knight on the square. So let's just take on b6. And if he plays knight takes, I let his rook in the game, but it doesn't matter though, because the queens are no longer on the board. So that check won't help him. He takes, now I takes, and he's probably going to be getting checkmated on the next move. Rook to a6 is a checkmate, so he has to play king to a7 here. I mean, it's crazy. Okay, he plays rook to f7, which means if I check here, the rook is going to block. So let's play bishop to f3 first. The threat is still better than the execution. Now I'm threatening to take on f3 with check and then try to checkmate him on the upcoming moves. For example, check, rook block, take on d5, and then that's going to be a checkmate. So now he's in like real trouble here. But he resigns. More BONGCLOUD against 2000 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 2000. We're about to play the hardest game yet. We're playing against a Sicilian defense. I mean, honestly, a Sicilian defense versus a BONGCLOUD isn't too bad, to be honest. Okay, knight c6. Let's go pawn c3 to prevent the knight from going to d4. Now, this guy's 2000, so I have to try to play at least fast or something. So pawn to e5. I wanted to hide my king on f2. That was always the strategy. But if pawn f4 he takes, let's go pawn f3. So I already played three pawn moves. He plays knight f6. I'm assuming he's gonna burst the center open. Let's play king to f2. Let's just hide on f2. That was the strategy that I've been using. Hiding on f2 so that way the rest of my pieces gets good development. So pawn to d5 was played. A. These 2000 guys, they know what they're doing. All right, I'm going to take on d5, followed by bishop to c4, developing my bishop pointing towards the knight. And I just want to be able to complete my development, to be honest. Like, I don't want it to be a case where I'm not able to be developed. So knight to f4, I'm already thinking about pawn g3. And if knight d3, I just take and then play queen to e2. Just get the queens off the board. If I get the queens off the board, then technically he did not punish me. So wait, is the knight trapped? What if I play king to? Because okay, I'm planning on takes and then queen e2. But what if I play king to e2? Oh, maybe there's bishop to f4, which is annoying. So let's just take. And then after queen takes, we play queen e2. We get the queens off the board. This is defense 101. The king is not safe. You're not able to get castles. Get the queens off the board. And then once the queens are off the board, it should be a normal game. Like if he takes and I takes, it's just a matter of pawn d3, bishop e3, develop the knights, and then I should be doing fine. Ah, you see, he's trying to be fancy. He plays queen to c2 to attack my bishop, but I'm able to play knight a3 and gain a tempo on his queen. You see, he has to be careful, 'cause the queen is not trapped, but that queen was almost trapped. And I'm also thinking of knight b5, threatening some forks on c7. Okay, queen a4. Queen a4, pawn b3 hits the queen again. Queen a5. Yeah, maybe he's gonna play queen a5. He's probably gonna play queen a5 regardless. Because if I play knight b5, queen a5 defends it. And then my knight on b5 isn't really doing much. So what if I play knight c4? I like knight c4. Or what if I play b3, queen a5, knight c4? There's queen c7. So what if I play knight c4, threatens to take on e5, which means I'm applying pressure to the pin piece. Pawn to f4 is also coming to apply pressure to the pin piece. And to as far as I'm concerned, my king is safe on f2, especially if I get the chance to play king to g2. My king is going to be safe on g2. Okay, that's not bad. Queen to a6 is not bad because if I take on e5, he's gonna take on e2 with check, and then I'm gonna be losing my knight. So what if I play f4 though? That was the whole idea. F4 applies pressure to the pin pawn. Yeah, let's do that. F4 applies pressure to the pin pawn, which means I'm currently threatening to take on e5, and he just, bro, that's a pawn. And if he plays bishop to, wait, it's a bit tricky. If I takes, queen takes, knight takes, knight, that's just a pawn. Just take. If he trades the queen, knight takes, and then if he takes, I takes, and that's just a pawn. Okay, I was about to say I was not expecting to win the 2000 game, but it's just a pawn. I still have a lot of stuff to do. So he castles, and I'm thinking of pawn d4, and I'm gonna play pawn d4 because I need to develop. So pawn d4, beautiful pawn chain. He takes. I like the idea of knight takes. I like the idea of knight takes, but let's play pawn takes. I think the bishop is going on d5. Bishop c4 is not good. So he's threatening and removing the guard tactic. He's trying to take my knight and then take this pawn. What if I play bishop g5, hit the rook? And then once he moves the rook, I go rook c1, pin the bishop, and then apply pressure to the bishop. Bishop g5, f6, take on f6, takes on e2, take on g7. I'm just going to do it. It's a tempo. I develop my bishop, I hit the rook. If he takes my knight, I take his rook. If he plays rook d7, I go rook c1. I mean, he's able to play rook to c7, but I'm ahead by a pawn. This is just a regular endgame. I'm chill. I'm gonna win this game. There's no losing this game. I don't usually lose more than one games anyways, right? So pawn f6 was what we thought of. We take on f6. Crucial move. And then if he takes, that's a fork. And then if he takes here, we don't take back. We take on g7, hit the rook. And then if the bishop takes, we grab the rook. And if he takes here, we grab this. Wait. Okay, I'm currently check. What if I check first? Nah, let's just take. Take. Position is technically equal, but I'm attacking everything literally. I'm speaking in literal terms. Every single one of his pieces is under attack. So I'm gonna be winning back something. So if he takes my pawn, I take his rook. If he takes with check, I take his bishop. Takes my pawn, take his rook. He resigns.